Chapter 1863. Feng Wui's green armor was extremely tough and had an amazing defensive power. When he was hit, he would send out a force to attack the opponent. It had the ability to defend and counterattack, making it difficult to deal with. The green armor covered his entire body, providing Feng Wui with the greatest protection and allowing him to attack with more ease. Feng Wui's hibernation sword art had already surpassed its original level and had reached a level that was comparable to or even better than the silver sword art. It was a top inherited sword art and was extremely powerful. The fine green sword light was like a thunderbolt and contained an amazing power. It tore through the sky and made ear-piercing roars, directly exploding in the ears and directly attacking the primordial spirit. Those whose primordial spirits were not strong enough would be shaken and feel dizzy, unable to concentrate. Every time a bolt of azure lightning exploded, it would tear the void apart and leave behind a series of pitch-black cracks. Sword Demon Feng Wui's hibernation sword art had become a destructive sword art and did not contain anything else. Chumu felt the pressure, a huge pressure. This pressure did not make him feel afraid or fearful, but excited and excited. This is the opponent that I have been looking for, Chumu thought to himself. The divine wilderness sword essence was fully mobilized and surged between his meridians. It was like the water of a great river, rolling and roaring endlessly. The 8th rank late stage Saint Body's power was agitated, wave after wave. Under the bulging muscles, it condensed into a winding dragon. Under the technique of chi power unification, the two types of power were completely integrated and the power was multiplied. At this moment, Chumu released all of his power without holding back. This was the first time he had used his full power since returning from Sin City. Wind and clouds gathered, thunder and lightning filled the sky and the sky changed color. In an instant, the aura that gushed out from Chumu's body shook all directions, shocking the 12 experts and the 12 heavenly demons of the Bright Sun Alliance who were in the midst of the intense battle. Is this Brother Chu's strength? So strong, so strong. It's too terrifying. With such strength, I am not his match at all. The 12 powerhouses of the Bright Sun Alliance thought to themselves as they were shocked. The shock in the hearts of the 6 stars was even more indescribable. When the 6 of them were defeated by Chumu, they felt that Chumu's strength was already very terrifying. However, they never imagined that Chumu's true strength would be so tyrannical. Just the aura that he was emitting at this time was enough to suppress them, making it difficult for them to have the heart to resist. The 12 heavenly demons were shocked beyond words. Such an aura was so powerful that it could kill them with a single sword strike. How could they not be afraid? Feng Wui also had an extremely shocked expression on his face. Shortly after, an incomparably blazing demonic chi soared up into the sky, like a blazing sun hanging in the sky, vast and mighty. That demonic chi was blazing hot, vigorous, and ferocious, as if it could suppress the entire world. It clashed with Chumu's aura, an invisible confrontation, a roaring storm, a raging tsunami, capable of destroying everything. Under the collision of the two's auras, the sword demon sect's base collapsed one after another. It was as if an invisible hurricane had swept through, destroying everything. The ground trembled, and cracks appeared one after another. The corpses of the sword demon sect's disciples fell into the cracks, as if they were devoured by a giant beast. The 12 Bright Sun Alliance's powerhouses and the 12 heavenly demons could not withstand the impact of such aura. They had no choice but to temporarily stop and retreat far away. Otherwise, not to mention fighting, they would not even be able to withstand it. If the battle dragged on, they might even be injured. Even though they had retreated far away, they did not have the heart to continue fighting at this moment because the impact was too great. Could it be that they have already surpassed the Bright Sun realm? The crowd could not help but have such a thought, but they felt that it was impossible. Surpassing the Bright Sun realm meant that they had already reached the King realm. For tens of thousands of years, There had only been 7 king inheritances in the land of exile. There had never been an 8th king realm expert. I did not expect your strength to reach the half-king realm. Feng Wui could not stop laughing. A half-king realm expert was above the bright sun realm, but not as strong as a true king realm expert. It was just a title. Half-king realm, huh? Chu Mu repeated in a low voice. Above the 3 great powers was the king realm. Perhaps this half-king realm was only defined by sword demon Feng Wui himself. However, it was very appropriate to describe it. After all, even a peak bright sun realm expert was not as strong as Yi Shiwen. Above the half-king realm is the true king realm. That is the realm of absolute powerhouses. I am already very close to it. Chu Mu thought to himself. He was in high spirit. In an instant, his aura seemed to have increased by a notch. His hands trembled slightly, and the 2 swords shook the void. A buzzing sound spread out in all directions, shaking the heavens and earth. The void around the swords started to crumble inch by inch because it could not withstand the powerful force. Pitch-black scars appeared and disappeared continuously. It looked very strange. Yi Shiwen's figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's eyes. He instantly appeared beside Feng Wui and attacked with his 2 swords. Meteor bright moon, the combination of the stars and the moon. Its power was unparalleled and unparalleled. Feng Wui smiled evilly. His eyes flickered with green light. 2 incomparably sharp sword light shot out. The long sword in his hand vibrated, and terrifying lightning wreaked havoc. It surrounded the surroundings and shattered Chu Mu's figure. That was just an afterimage. It circled around at an extremely fast speed. There were countless afterimages and countless sword light. Both sides' speed had reached the extreme. The 12 heavenly demons and the 12 powerhouses of the Bright Sun Alliance could not catch up to them. Cloud piercing. Chu Mu's figure suddenly stopped. It was as if he was fixed in the void. Thousands of clouds emerged from the depths of the void and spread out in all directions. Feng Wui's figure was also trapped in it. Then, it seemed as if specks of starlight had appeared amidst the myriad of clouds and mist. A beam of extremely condensed sword light seemed to have emerged from the ancient times. It broke through the darkness and eternity, and arrived in this world. It silently shot towards Feng Wui at an indescribable speed. Where the sword light passed, specks of starlight gathered, causing the sword light to flicker. Its power was further enhanced. This sword was the cloud-piercing sword style. It was also the cloud-piercing sword style that had integrated the essence of the 15th move of the 13 meteor strike. Its power was even more powerful. Since comprehending the essence of the heart and sword as one, Chu Mu had cultivated other sword techniques in order to integrate the heart and sword as one into his self-created sword style. The 13 meteor strikes, the moon-cutting technique, and the lone peak sword technique had been comprehended and improved time and time again. Now, he had successfully integrated the heart and sword as one into the cloud-piercing sword style. Where the heart willed, the sword would follow. The speed of the sword had reached the extreme, and its power had also reached the extreme. Such a sword style, could not be resisted. Feng Wui had only just reacted when the silent sword light had already shot towards his head. It wanted to pierce through it. The cloud-piercing sword style was originally very powerful. After integrating the essence of the 13 meteor strikes, its power was further enhanced. It had completely reached the limit of the inherited level. The next step would be the king level. Feng Wui felt a strong threat. In his shock, he hurriedly tried his best to dodge. Chu Mu's sword hit his chest. The armor on his body displayed an amazing defense, but it was still pierced through by Chu Mu's sword. It went straight for his heart. With a backhand sword, he slashed towards Chu Mu. It was like a green thunderbolt descending from the sky, destroying all life on Earth. Even though it lacked transformations, its power was extremely shocking. It was not inferior to the cloud-piercing sword style at all. Sword aura shadow. The real body appeared. It was unknown when the sword was raised high. Sword light spread, gathered, condensed, and converged. A kind of aura that could cut through everything spontaneously rose and spread out. Dao cutter sword style. In the past few years, Chu Mu had not only successfully integrated the heart and sword as one into the cloud-piercing sword style, but also into the Dao cutter sword style. The cloud-piercing sword style, Dao cutter sword style, and so on were sword styles of the same level. Successfully integrating one of them and then the other sword styles would be much less difficult and easier to do. In terms of power, the Dao cutter sword style was stronger than the cloud-piercing sword style. However, its speed was much slower. However, Chu Mu seized the opportunity for this attack. The sword slashed down. The converged sword light looked very ordinary, but it contained a kind of terrifying aura that could cut the sky and split the earth. Feng Wui's expression changed greatly. His eyes once again shot out green sword light towards Chu Mu. He raised the longsword in his hand and supported it with both hands, trying to block Chu Mu's slash. The eternal spiritual sword in his left hand shook and shattered two green sword light. The blazing glory spiritual sword's slash did not reduce in the slightest. Break! Chu Mu roared. Light shot out from his eyes like a divine sword unsheathed. The momentum of this slash seemed to be even stronger. The moment they came into contact, Feng Wui's arms trembled. The sword he had raised bent in the middle and then broke. The instant defense allowed Feng Wui to seize the opportunity to retreat. However, he wasn't able to completely avoid the attack. Chu Mu's sword still slashed across his chest, forcibly cutting open the astonishing defensive cyan armor, injuring his body and causing blood to spurt out. Feng Wui rapidly retreated. The injuries on his body healed rapidly. Damn it, my human body is restricting my strength. Feng Wui was furious. His essence was that of a fierce demon from the Black God's secret realm. The fierce demon body was the most suitable body for him to display his strength. If he wanted to sneak into the human race, he would not have given up his own body and taken over a human's body. Although the human body was also very good, it would limit the use of some of his techniques. Before, this wasn't important because no one was his opponent. Now, under the same strength, Chu Mu's sword technique was much more exquisite than his. That sword technique was difficult to dodge and difficult to defend against. His body's weakness was revealed. If he could reach the king realm, he would be able to reform his body into a fierce demon body. At that time, he would be able to display his strength to the extreme. Feng Wui retreated while Chu Mu advanced. His two swords were like the wings of an eagle. His speed increased, and his killing intent could destroy the world. He appeared in front of Feng Wui. Good! Brother Chu, kill him. The 12 experts of the Bright Sun Alliance were overjoyed. It seemed that Chu Mu had gained the upper hand. Although they did not know how Chu Mu gained the upper hand, it was not important. Demon Lord. Burn my demon body, Demon Lord will not die. Chapter 1864. Aside from his trump card, Chu Mu's strength had reached its peak by releasing all of his strength. Half-king level, a level that surpassed the limits of the Bright Yang realm, a level that was infinitely close to the king level. A sword that pierced through the clouds and a sword that chopped through the path immediately put Feng Wui at a disadvantage. His two swords went berserk, and his strength erupted like a volcano, turning into a torrent of magma that surged and poured out without holding back. The blazing, breathtaking, and resplendent sword light was unending. It was as if the Milky Way was pouring down from the ninth heaven, and all of it crashed into Feng Wui's body. Waves of powerful recoil force crashed into Chu Mu's two swords from the shockingly defensive armor. However, Chu Mu used a unique technique to make the two swords even faster and even more berserk. The armor on Feng Wui's body was already incomplete after being split apart by the cloud-piercing sword form and the path-severing sword form. Facing Chu Mu's incomparably berserk attacks, it was unable to completely resist. Gradually, cracks began to appear and it shattered. Without the protection of the armor, Feng Wui's body could not withstand Chu Mu's berserk two swords, no matter how strong his body was. Every sword carried the combination of Chu Mu's divine wilderness sword essence and the power of the sage body. The power of every sword was unbelievably strong, and it was integrated into the heart and sword as one. Every sword was extremely fast and accurate, displaying the speed, accuracy, and ferocity of the sword technique to the fullest. Sword after sword slashed Feng Wui's body, shattering it. The two swords crossed, and the blazing cross-sword light was like a red-hot iron, directly imprinting into the void, slashing Feng Wui's body. It passed through his body and disappeared into the void behind Feng Wui. Feng Wui's body was split into 4 parts, falling down. We won. We killed him. Burn my demon body, the demon lord will not die. The 12 heavenly demons all chanted, and a little green flame emerged from the depths of their demon bodies, rapidly spreading throughout their bodies and out of their bodies, burning fiercely. Kill. When the 12 powerhouses of the Bright Yang Alliance saw this, their expressions changed drastically. They were afraid that something unexpected would happen, so they immediately attacked with their sword. However, the sword light penetrated the green flames without causing any damage. Immediately, the 12 heavenly demons turned into green flames and shot toward Feng Wui, who had been cut into 4 pieces, and entered his body. A sudden change occurred. Feng Wui's body reassembled and became whole again. The shattered green armor on his body was also completely restored. He didn't seem to have suffered any injuries as he reappeared in front of Chu Mu. A series of all-out attacks had put a certain burden on Chu Mu. When Feng Wui's body had been cut into 4 pieces, Chu Mu had let out a sigh of relief. He had thought that he would be able to kill Feng Wui, but he hadn't expected such a change. You won't be able to kill me. Feng Wui laughed. His green demonic chi made threatening gestures like a dancing dragon. What answered him was a blazing and berserk cross-shaped sword light. Chu Mu attacked again. In his life, he had encountered many opponents. These opponents were either powerful or had other abilities. The so-called immortality was only a relative term. There was no such thing as immortality. Even the eternal force wasn't absolutely eternal. After receiving the support of the 12 heavenly demons, Feng Wui had not only completely recovered, but a faint green flame covered his body, making his aura more powerful and condensed. Demonic fire wings. With a low shout, the green flame on Feng Wui's body surged and condensed on his back, eventually turning into a pair of green flame wings. With the demonic fire wings on his body, Feng Wui's speed suddenly increased. In a flash, he dodged Chu Mu's 2 swords, and with a turn, the longsword burning with faint green flames tore through the void. Thunder and fire intertwined, and killing intent surged like a tide. Chu Mu's pupils slightly trembled. Feng Wui's speed had shocked him. Feng Wui's counterattack was too fast, and the angle was mysterious. Chu Mu couldn't dodge and could only block. When the attack hit, an incomparably huge force sent Chu Mu flying. His body was like a cannonball, and he instantly flew a few hundred meters, leaving a white trace in the void. Join hands. The 6 star sovereigns and 6 veteran Bright Yang sword saints immediately reacted. Their opponents, the 12 heavenly demons, had turned into demonic fire to support Feng Wui. Not only did Feng Wui come back to life, but he also became stronger. Chu Mu was actually sent flying by a single sword. They couldn't just sit and watch. In an instant, the 12 Bright Yang sword saints displayed their secret sword skills. 1000 Army Slaughter, Silver-White Death Sword, Black Demon Slaughter, Aurora Sword Strike, Dragon Slaying Style, Cyan Beauty Misty Rain, Sword Light of different colors. The 12 secret sword light tore through the sky and locked onto Feng Wui. Insignificant tricks. Feng Wui sneered disdainfully. Not long ago, the 6-star sovereigns had joined hands and displayed such tyrannical secret sword skills, but they couldn't do anything to Chu Mu. One had to know that Chu Mu hadn't displayed his full strength at that time. But now, Feng Wui's strength was only stronger than Chu Mu's when he was at his peak. Feng Wui didn't dodge at all. The cyan longsword in his hand burned with cyan demonic fire. With a light shake, it turned into 12 sword light, tearing through the sky. The cyan sword light was even faster and more dazzling than lightning. It tore through the sky and shattered the 12 secret sword skills. The aftershock hadn't dissipated yet, and it attacked the 12 bright young sword saints, hitting their bodies. This sword not only destroyed the secret sword skills, but also sent the 12 bright young sword saints flying. Lightning and flames coiled around their bodies, wreaking havoc, instantly injuring them. The gap was too big, so big that it made them despair. Even if the 12 of them joined hands to form a battle formation, they were still no match for Feng Wui. Even if they didn't die, Feng Wui's demonic energy was wreaking havoc in their bodies. They had to use all their strength to suppress it. Thus, they couldn't fight anymore. "I want your primordial spirits." Feng Wui's voice drifted from far to near, as if it was right beside their ears. Immediately, everyone felt their yuan spirits tremble as if they were being sucked away by a force. It was as if they were about to leave their bodies, which made them extremely shocked. This was Feng Wui attacking their yuan spirit. He wanted to grab and devour their yuan spirit. Once their yuan spirits were pulled out, they would die without a doubt. Injured and unable to resist, everyone fell into despair. They thought that they were going to die this time. Unexpectedly, the suction force was forcefully cut off. Chu Mu attacked again. From the time he was sent flying to the time when the 12 bright young sword saints were injured and their yuan spirits were almost pulled out, only a short moment had passed. However, Chu Mu had already adjusted himself and equipped himself with his silver divine equipment. He activated the demon-suppressing arm armor and his strength increased by several times. He became even more powerful and faster as he charged forward. Facing Chu Mu, Feng Wui didn't dare to relax. He had to fight with his full strength, not to mention Chu Mu, who was equipped with the silver god armor. With the demonic fire wings, Feng Wui's speed became even faster. With the silver god armor, Chu Mu's speed also increased. Fight, fight, fight. The two figures almost disappeared completely. In the sky and on the ground, they collided everywhere. Every time they collided, there would be a dazzling sword light. Every time they collided, a piece of space would shatter. The 12 of them opened their eyes wide. Even if they were injured and couldn't use their full strength, their eyesight was still outstanding. However, they couldn't see anything. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. Chu Mu gradually grasped the rhythm, and slowly guided Feng Wui into his own rhythm. Feng Wui was injured again and again, but the demonic fire on his body would heal him instantly. It seemed like he was immortal. There is no such thing as immortality. Chu Mu thought. Sword domain, activate. Under the sword domain, it covered an area and Chu Mu's strength and speed were strengthened again. Sword domain change. With a low chant, the sword domain was activated. A part of the sword domain's power immediately condensed on the two swords in Chu Mu's hands, causing the two swords to possess the characteristics of the sword domain. After more than 7 years, Chu Mu's application of the sword domain had improved further. After integrating a part of the sword domain's power, the power of the swords increased by at least 3 to 4 times. Chu Mu named it Sword Domain Change. It can still be improved. Feng Wui was incomparably shocked. Cloud Piercer. Cutting Dao. The two swords attacked together. Under the control of the heart and sword as one, two powerful sword moves attacked Feng Wui's body. Although the cyan armor's defensive power was strong, it couldn't withstand the attack of Chu Mu's two swords. It was broken again and the body was injured. The demonic fire burned and the body quickly healed. Chu Mu keenly sensed that the demonic fire seemed to have weakened. As expected, Chu thought. The so-called immortality was relative. The demonic fire gave Feng Wui immortality, but it was constantly consumed. If it wasn't replenished, the demonic fire might be used up after a few more times. Sword God descends. After more than 7 years, the power of Sword God descends had recovered by more than half. It could be used again. The sharpness increased tenfold. Under the sword domain change, the space under the swords was directly locked. The terrifying binding power affected Feng Wui's body, causing his speed to drop sharply. It was even harder to dodge. Countless sword light poured out, bombarding Feng Wui's body. Unable to dodge, the armor on his body was shattered again. Chu had the advantage, completely suppressing Feng Wui. "You can't kill me." Feng Wui's voice came out, trying to shake Chu's conviction with words. "You can't die because of the demonic fire on your body. When the demonic fire is exhausted, you will die." Chu's voice also entered Feng Wui's ears, causing Feng Wui's face to change. "Stop." Feng Wui panicked. "Quickly stop." He didn't want to die. He still wanted to become a king, a supreme existence. Chu didn't care at all. Sword after sword, he continuously weakened the demon fire on Feng Wui's body. Although each strike was very weak, Chu's sword speed was extremely fast, and each strike was fatal. In a breath of time, there were at least a few hundred swords that struck Feng Wui's body, causing sufficient damage and consuming the demon fire's energy. Last sword, Heaven's Might. Raging brilliant spirit sword was raised high. Thunder rumbled in the sky, as if the heaven was angry. A mighty pressure descended, immobilizing Feng Wui. Chapter 1865. Thunder rumbled like the wrath of the heavens. It was as if the heavens were about to collapse and destroy all life. Heaven's might was unstoppable. This was Chu's strongest sword move. Although he had yet to integrate the essence of heart and sword as one into the Heaven's Might sword style, its power was still unparalleled. Heart and sword as one could make the sword move faster, more accurate, and more ruthless. But Chu's countless sword attacks had already caused enough damage to Feng Wui, causing his body to stiffen. He couldn't react in time and couldn't dodge the Heaven's Might sword style. Slash. Thunder rumbled, invincible, and all living things were destroyed. Feng Wui could only watch in horror. He was powerless to dodge or resist. The demonic fire dissipated and his body shattered, turning into a rain of blood and flesh. Only a heart-like core was left. Indeed, a fierce demon. Chu looked at the heart-like core. It was similar to the core of a fierce demon in the black mysterious realm. Break! The sword was as fast as the wind and as fierce as lightning, striking the core. The core was extremely hard, at least 100 times harder than the black mysterious realm's silver-horned fierce demon's core. But it couldn't block Chu's sword. After the core was broken, an indescribably pure energy spread out. Chu circulated his cultivation technique, and a suction force sucked the incomparably pure energy into his body. It followed the divine wilderness sword essence and circulated in his meridians. Chu immediately felt that his cultivation base, which had just broken through to the middle stage of Wangu Ninth Heaven, was rapidly stabilizing and increasing. Soon, he reached the peak of the middle stage of Wangu Ninth Heaven. He was just a hair's breadth away from the late stage. Within a year, my cultivation base will definitely break through to the late stage. Chu thought to himself. This could be considered a great harvest after killing Feng Wui. Of course, there was also Feng Wui's spatial ring. Who knows, there might be many good things in it. Sword demon Feng Wui was dead, and so were the 12 heaven demons. The top 3 experts of the sword demon sect were all killed right from the start. Thousands of powerful disciples died. It could be said that the sword demon sect only existed in name now. After all, the disciples who were able to stay in Sword Demon Sect's headquarters were all powerful. But now they were all dead. Brother Chu, you're really too powerful. You're the strongest person below the 7 kings. Long Huan sighed sincerely on the way back. After adjusting their breathing, their injuries were basically healed. Feng Wu-yi is also very strong, Chumu said. His tone was somewhat regretful. What he regretted was that Feng Wu-yi had a formidable strength, but he was unable to display it to the fullest extent. In terms of strength, Feng Wu-yi was not inferior to Chumu at all. In terms of talent, he was indeed talented. Just look at his thunder hibernation swordsmanship. After modification, its power had reached the limit of the inherited level. It was even more powerful than the silver sword technique. It was very powerful, but unfortunately, the time was too short. The vicious demon was a kind of intelligent life form, and so was the human race. Although they both had a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs, there was a clear difference in essence. It wasn't easy to control a body that didn't belong to the same race. There would be various restrictions, and it would often take a long time to adapt and completely grasp it. It had only been a dozen years since the vicious demon obtained Feng Wu-yi's body. It was a very short time. Moreover, he focused more on the improvement of his strength. The speed of improvement was too fast, and there wasn't enough time to adjust. In just a dozen years, it was already very shocking to be able to raise an inherited level sword technique to the limit of the inherited level. If Feng Wu-yi was given a few dozen or 100 years to adjust his body properly, it would be even more difficult for Chumu to win if they fought under the same strength. It could be said that the outcome of the battle would be unpredictable. But no matter what, there was no doubt about Feng Wu-yi's strength. If it were other bright young experts, they wouldn't be his opponent at all. Not to mention techniques, Feng Wu-yi had an absolute advantage in terms of strength. No one died this time. Although the 12 bright young experts were all injured, they were able to kill Feng Wu-yi. After quickly returning to the slaughtering blood hall, they collectively appeared and announced the death of Sword Demon Feng Wu-yi and the 12 heavenly demons. They ordered the Bright Young Alliance to move out and hunt down the remaining disciples of the Sword Demon sect. For a moment, the whole world was shocked. The Sword Demon sect that ran rampant under the heavens made countless people fearful and anxious. It was unknown how many massacres they had caused. But today, they were actually eradicated? The strongest and most ferocious person, known as the First Sword Star, the strongest expert of the younger generation, the strongest person under the 7 kings, Sword Demon Feng Wu-yi, was actually dead. He was killed. How shocking was this? And when the news spread that the one who killed Sword Demon Feng Wu-yi was Chumu, the shock was even greater. Everywhere in the 5 great cities, people were talking about Chumu. The name Chumu was deeply ingrained in people's hearts. I knew it. He wouldn't die so easily. Unparalleled Sword Star, unparalleled Sword Star. The name Unparalleled lives up to his name. Who can compare to him? Not only is he unparalleled in the younger generation, but in the older generation, other than the 7 kings, who can be his opponent? The 7 stars, no, the unparalleled Sword Star is already far ahead. He has completely surpassed the 6 stars. The strongest person under the 7 kings. Perhaps he will become the 8th king. Chumu, who had completely become the center of attention, was currently cultivating in the manner. No matter how much praise, no matter how much glory, in Chumu's eyes, it was all empty, like bubbles. For example, Sword Demon Feng Wu-yi had great strength and was above the 6 stars. He was known as the strongest expert of the younger generation, the strongest person under the 7 kings. However, after he was killed by Chumu, all the praise fell on Chumu's head. He was like a stepping stone for Chumu. Chumu understood very clearly that strength was the only thing that mattered. The Waning Moon Sword Saint, the Rock Sword Saint, and the little maid Lin Biruo were different. They were very happy and excited. It was completely from the bottom of their hearts. It was as if they were the ones being praised. The Sword Demon sect was a huge threat to everyone. Now that it had been eradicated, only a few disciples of the Sword Demon sect were still wandering around, lingering at death's door. They were like street rats that everyone wanted to kill. Once they were discovered, they would be immediately killed. Some of the disciples of the Sword Demon sect had no choice but to leave the 5 cities. A few months later, it was very difficult to find any traces of the Sword Demon sect's disciples within the 5 major cities. Those who were dead were all dead, and those who were still alive were either far away from the 5 major cities, or had completely hidden themselves, not daring to appear in front of others. The aura on his body fluctuated, and then, in an instant, it became much stronger, reaching a higher level. I finally broke through. Chumu thought. Almost a year had passed since he had killed Feng Wu-yi. His Yuan Qi cultivation had successfully risen from the peak of the middle 9 heavens stage to the late 9 heavens stage, as he had expected. The increase in cultivation brought with it an increase in strength. The late 9 heavens stage and the peak 9 heavens stage are only a small level away. There are still a little more than 10 years before the time we agreed on. That should be enough. What I lack now is the cultivation of the path of the divine body. The cultivation of the sacred body path had always been Chu Mu's vexation. Without a suitable technique, it was a huge drawback. Without a suitable technique, it would be extremely difficult to improve. In reality, even if there was a suitable technique, it wouldn't be easy to cultivate. It would often require a long period of time and energy to accumulate. Cultivation techniques, resources, and time were all indispensable. It just so happened that Chu Mu lacked these 3 things. It was too difficult to improve a divine body that was close to the peak of the late 8 heavens stage. It is still unknown whether I can reach the peak of the 8 heavens stage in 10 years, Chu Mu thought to himself. Although the half-monarch stage was second only to the king stage, the difference between a half-monarch and a real monarch was obvious. Even if his Yuan Qi cultivation had reached the peak of the 9 heavens stage, Chu Mu was sure that his strength was still not comparable to a real peerless expert. Therefore, the cultivation of the divine body was very important. Today, Long Yun Kong came again. His cultivation had obviously improved, but it was within the normal range of a genius. "Brother Chu, good news," Long Yun Kong said with a smile as soon as he arrived. "It's good news that Brother Long is here," Chu Mu said with a smile. "Haha, the sect master asked me to bring the 3 saints' secret sword to you," Long Yun Kong said with a smile. "What's the condition?" Chu Mu asked. This was indeed a pleasant surprise. It was good news, but he had to ask clearly. "No conditions," Long Yun Kong said with a smile. Chu Mu was indeed surprised. No conditions? The 3 saints' secret sword was the foundation of the 3 saints' sects. Was it that simple to give it away? When I conveyed Brother Chu's message, the sect master also said that he wanted Brother Chu to join the 3 saints' sects. However, Brother Chu didn't agree, so the matter was put on hold, Long Yun said. The Sword Demon sect is a great threat to all the forces in the 5 cities. If Brother Chu hadn't killed the Sword Demon Feng Wui, the 3 saints' sects would have followed in the footsteps of the other forces. We would either become a subsidiary of the Sword Demon sect or be destroyed by the Sword Demon sect. Therefore, after a discussion with the other elders, the sect master decided to give the 3 saints' secret sword to Brother Chu as a token of gratitude. We just hope that Brother Chu won't spread it around. I see. Chu Mu understood immediately. In fact, it wasn't a bad thing for the 3 saints' sects. Chu Mu wouldn't spread it around. He would only practice it himself. If he used it against enemies, it would mean that he was related to the 3 saints' sects. With Chu Mu's current reputation, it was a good thing for the 3 saints' sects. Speaking of which, the 3 saints' sects didn't lose anything. Chu Mu accepted the 3 saints' secret sword with a clear conscience. "Okay, Brother Chu, should we practice again?" Long Yun Kong said after giving the 3 saints' secret sword to Chu Mu. "Brother Long, please." Chu Mu put away the copy of the 3 saints' secret sword and gestured with his hand. Chapter 1866. During the scorching sun period, the sun hung high in the sky, releasing rays of light that were as hot as swords. Forget it. Chu Mu shook his head and dismissed the idea of searching for Gu Luankong, Yang Zhantian, and Lien Hongyun. Ever since they parted ways in the land of exile, Chu Mu had not heard any news about the three of them in the past 20 years. It was as if they had suddenly disappeared or died. The land of exile was big, but it was also small. If he really wanted to search for them, he could rely on the power of the 5 city leaders and the flowing light army to find them. However, since the agreement was within 30 years, he would wait until the time was up. Chu Mu's intuition told him that the three of them might encounter some danger, but they could survive and become stronger. What he needed to do was to increase his strength as much as possible before the agreed time. The 3 saints are the human saint, the earth saint, and the heaven saint. The human saint, the earth saint, and the heaven saint are the 3 talents. The saint has no desires and does not move easily. With the 3 talents as the foundation and the saint as the guide, the heaven saint draws the heaven saint to form the way of the sword. In the manner, Chu Mu was comprehending the 3 saints' secret swords from the 3 saints' sect. This was only a copy of the 3 saints' secret swords. Even if the 3 saints' sect was willing to give the 3 saints' secret swords to Chu Mu unconditionally, they would not give him the original copy. The original copy was not only meant to be passed down from generation to generation, but it also contained a kind of spirit and mystery. It was naturally better to have the original copy. After all, the person who wrote the original copy was the creator of the 3 saints' secret sword. When he wrote it, he naturally incorporated the mystery of the 3 saints' secret swords into it. This was something that no other copy could compare with. Even though it was only a copy, it did not affect Chu Mu's comprehension. This copy was very complete. After Chu Mu opened it, there were words and pictures. He first quickly skimmed through it to understand the general meaning. He firmly memorized every picture in his mind. Then, he carefully read it word by word and pondered over it. Bit by bit, understanding appeared in his mind. Chu Mu could not help but be amazed by the mystery of the 3 saints' secret swords. The 3 saints' secret art was divided into 3 parts. He had already seen the human saint's sword of true image from Long Yunkong. Of course, Long Yunkong was only at the beginner level, so he was unable to display the true power and profundity of the secret sword of 3 saints. The second sword was the earth sacred ancient Xiang sword. The third sword was the most powerful. It was the heavenly sacred formless sword. The mortal saint, earth saint, and heavenly saint were the 3 saints. The origin manifestation, ancient manifestation, and heavenly manifestation were the 3 manifestations. The combination of the 3 sages and the 3 sages into the way of the sword created the mystical surekill of the 3 sages' secret sword. The human sage's true image sword is the foundation. If you don't cultivate this sword, even if you obtain the other 2 swords, it will be useless. Human saint, true form, these were the key points of this secret art. While comprehending, Chu Mu's aura began to change. His presence became stronger and stronger. If he was placed in a crowd, he would be extremely eye-catching, like a crane in a flock of chickens. The change in his aura was extremely mysterious. In an instant, Chu Mu seemed to have become the center of the sky and earth. Many experts in Bloodbath City felt the change in his aura. They all frowned and looked towards the manor. They all had a feeling, or perhaps it was an illusion, as if the center of the world had shifted. This was because Chu Mu's strength was extremely powerful. He was the number 1 person under the 7 kings, the strongest. His aura constantly condensed and became the strongest. It wasn't strange for him to affect the entire Blood Slaughter City. They did not know what Chu Mu was doing, but as the aura continued to condense, they also felt a pressure. Their bodies and minds were beginning to be affected. This went on for 3 days in a row, making it impossible for the experts to concentrate on their cultivation. In the manner, Chu Mu, who was meditating, suddenly opened his eyes. In an instant, a sword light seemed to flash in the depths of his pupils. The sword light's presence was incomparably strong. It instantly appeared. In the void in front of him, countless air currents converged towards the center, squeezing everything. At the center, there seemed to be two invisible swords slicing through. Without moving his body and only using his mind to attack, the power was naturally not strong. However, it also represented that Chu Mu had reached the entry level of the human sage's true image sword. According to Chu Mu's speculations, the perfection of the human sage's true image sword was the cutting of 9 sword light. Back then, Long Yunkong's single sword light could only be regarded as barely reaching the entry level. 2 sword light was the true entry level. Although the 3 saints' secret sword techniques were powerful, Chu Mu's cloud-piercing sword style and Dao's severing sword style were not inferior in power either. It was just that the way they were manifested was different. Furthermore, the creator of the 3 saints' secret sword techniques had incorporated the application of various laws. This was something that Chu Mu did not possess. Chu Mu had not comprehended the 3 saints' secret sword techniques for battle or killing. He had only comprehended the profound essence within. Perhaps it would be useful to him. That was all. Apart from cultivating the sword, Chu Mu had also comprehended the 3 saints' secret sword technique. His comprehension was superb, and his attainments in the sword were unparalleled. As a result, it was not difficult for him to comprehend them. He was improving every day, which was very obvious. Half a month later, Chu Mu had completely grasped the human sage's true image sword. As soon as he opened his eyes, there were 9 sword light crisscrossing and slashing everywhere. There was no way to dodge. Since he had completely grasped the human sage's true image sword, the next step was the earth sage's ancient image sword. The 3 saints' secret sword techniques seemed to be a whole, but they were also independent entities. They each had their own complete essence. The human sage's true image sword was based on the human. The saint's image entered the body. The earth sage's ancient image sword was based on the earth. The saint's image appeared. In the blink of an eye, another few dozen days passed. Today, an aura descended upon the manor. This aura was vast and boundless, bringing with it a boundless ferocity. Chu Mu was alarmed. Raising his head, he saw that a blood-red color had appeared in the sky at some point. It was like a sea of blood with endless waves. As it bobbed up and down, the aura was so vast and profound that it made one despair. However, the waning moon sword saint, the monolith sword saint, and Lin Biruo did not seem to sense it at all. As the sea of blood surged, a blood-red streak of light turned into a crescent moon. It broke free and locked onto Chu Mu. Chu Mu's body tensed up as his hairs stood on end. His soul trembled. The blood-red sword light slashed down, bringing with it the might of the sea of blood. Immediately, it brought endless pressure to Chu Mu's mind, causing the power of his soul to ripple. Earth Sage's ancient image sword. With a flash of spiritual light and a low chant, Chu Mu's aura surged from top to bottom, pouring into the ground beneath him. The two seemed to be about to fuse together. Afterwards, as if the ground had been awakened from its slumber, a brand new energy constantly permeated from the ground, pouring into Chu Mu's body. It fused with him, becoming one with him. I am the ground, and the ground is me. This was the essence of the Earth Sage's ancient image sword. The human saint's origin image sword was based on the person, while the Earth Sage's ancient image sword was based on the ground. It gathered the power of the ground, using itself as a medium and the sword in hand as a conductor. It guided the power of the ground to fuse with one's own power, unleashing the greatest power possible. Chu Mu had used his mind to unleash this strike, as the Earth Sage's ancient image sword required the power of the laws of Earth to truly unleash it. Using the mind was not part of this. Moreover, the sea of blood in the sky and the blood-red sword light were not tangible. Instead, they were a form of mental pressure. It was precisely because of this that the waning moon sword saint, the monolith sword saint, and Lin Biruo did not sense it at all. The brown sword light soared into the sky. It was heavy and tough, as if it could shatter the sky. The brown sword light and the blood-red sword light instantly came into contact. When they collided, it was as if thunder had exploded in the void. Lin Biruo and the others unconsciously raised their heads to look. The sky was clear and the sun was shining brightly. They were puzzled. In Chu Mu's eyes, both the blood-red sword light and the brown sword light shattered at the same time. The surging sea of blood slowly descended, as if the sky was collapsing. Heavenly Saint Formless Sword. This was the final strike of the three saints' secret sword art, and also the most powerful strike. The heavens were far, the saints were high, formless, and colorless. Chu Mu's eyes flickered with a bright light, blazing like the sun in the sky. The surging blood ocean came crashing down, but it suddenly paused, as if it had been split apart by an invisible sword. Under the continuous slashes, the blood ocean was sliced apart, and its might dissipated. The human sage's true image sword used one's own body as the foundation. It condensed one's aura and power to the extreme, and in the end, unleashed 100% of one's power, transforming it into 9 swords. Each sword was the accumulation of one's power. Under the 9 swords, even if it was not 9 times the power, it would attack from every angle, making it difficult to guard against. Coupled with the pressure from the surroundings, it would be even more difficult to dodge. The Earth Sage's ancient image sword fused one with the earth, absorbing the power of the earth and gathering it into one's body, breaking through the limits of one's own power. A single sword strike would be at least twice as powerful as one's own combined power. When cultivated to perfection, it could even reach the limit of 5 times. For example, if an ordinary 9-star saint expert's power was 100, then when he used the Earth Sage's ancient image sword to perfection, its power would increase to 500. Furthermore, it was not just an increase in power, but also the stability and weight of the Earth's power. This kind of power's impact and suppression exceeded the 5 times increase in power. The final strike was the Heavenly Saint Formless Sword art. It fused one's body into the void, and borrowed the power of the void to combine with one's own power to maximize the power of the sword art. As a killing move even more powerful than the Earth Sage's ancient image sword art, the beginner level of the Heavenly Saint Formless Sword art could increase one's power by 7 times. When cultivated to perfection, it could increase one's power by 10 times. A 10-fold increase in strength was undoubtedly terrifying. It was as if a secret technique was being used. Moreover, in addition to the 10-fold increase in strength, the sword light that was condensed seemed to be shuttling through the void. It was silent, invisible, and untouchable. Silent, undetectable, untouchable, unblockable. Such a sword art could be said to be incomparably terrifying. Little friend Chu Mu, please make a trip to the blood slaughtering hall. When the blood sea dissipated, a deep and tyrannical voice resounded in Chu Mu's ears. It was very unfamiliar. Chapter 1867. Slaughtering Blood Manor. Chu Mu raised his head. His gaze seemed to pierce through time and space, landing on the slaughtering blood manor. Such power, far surpassing the bright young realm. Could it be that the slaughtering blood king has returned? Muttering to himself, Chu Mu didn't hesitate. He directly left the manor and headed towards the slaughtering blood manor. If it was really the slaughtering blood king who had returned and invited him, he most likely wouldn't have any malicious intentions. The previous confrontation on the spiritual level was more of a test because there was no killing intent in it. Very quickly, Chu Mu arrived outside the slaughtering blood manor without any obstructions. The guards of the slaughtering blood manor all looked at Chu Mu with incomparable reverence. They all knew that it was this person who had personally killed the sword demon, Feng Wui, who had instilled fear in countless people, and indirectly saved countless people from danger. Brother Chu, you're here. Follow me. Tu Qianjun seemed to have been waiting for a long time. He brought Chu Mu deep into the slaughtering blood manor. Not long after, they stopped outside a blood-colored great hall. "Brother Chu, this time, my master wants to see you," Tu Qianjun said. Shortly after, he spoke into the great hall. "Master, Chu Mu is here. Come in." A tyrannical voice rang out. It was the same voice that had invited Chu Mu to the slaughtering blood manor. Chu Mu followed Tu Qianjun into the great hall. What greeted them was a sea of blood swallowing them whole. Although Tu Qianjun was used to it, Chu Mu didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. After passing through the sea of blood, he saw everything in the great hall. Everything in the great hall was blood-red. A tall figure sat on the main seat. His aura was tyrannical, as if he was the center of the great hall, the center of the slaughtering blood manor. "Master." Tu Qianjun quietly stood to the side. "Greetings to the slaughtering blood king." Chu Mu bowed. "Little friend Chu, I've heard of your name more than 10 years ago. However, this should be the first time we're meeting." His voice always carried a sense of dominance. Those who were inferior to him in terms of strength and status would often feel restrained when facing him. Chu Mu was no ordinary person, but when facing the blood-slaughtering king, he could still feel a faint trace of pressure, but it was still within his tolerance range. "Little friend Chu, first of all, I would like to thank you for taking action and killing the sword demon Fengwui," Blood Slaughter King said. "Otherwise, by the time we return, the 5 great cities might have already been conquered. At that time, even if we kill sword demon Fengwui, the losses will be great." "It's just a coincidence," Chu Mu said. "Senior, I'm afraid you didn't call me here for this matter." "That's just one of the things. There's another thing," the Blood Slaughterer King said. "However, these 2 matters have something in common. They are related to the safety of the 5 great cities." "Senior, please speak clearly," Chu Mu said. "The danger sword demon Fengwui brought to the 5 great cities is relatively small, because we can resolve it as long as we return. However, as for the latter, even if the 7 of us work together, it will still be difficult to resolve," the blood-slaughtering king said with a serious expression. Tu Qianjun and Chu Mu also felt the severity of the problem. If even the 7 kings couldn't resolve it, how big was the danger? "Senior, if even the 7 kings can't resolve it, what ability do I have?" Chu Mu said. It wasn't that he was looking down on himself. At the very least, his current strength couldn't compare to any of the kings, let alone the 7 of them working together. "The current you obviously doesn't have the ability." The blood-slaughtering king was very direct. "However, little friend Chu's Yuan Qi cultivation is at the late stage of the 9th celestial layer, and your saint body is at the late stage of the 8th celestial layer, right? Your true strength has probably already surpassed the bright yang realm and is infinitely close to the king realm. If your Yuan Qi cultivation reaches the peak of the 9th celestial layer, and your saint body reaches the 9th celestial layer, then perhaps you'll have the strength of a king realm." As he spoke, the blood-slaughtering king suddenly looked very emotional. "I've seen countless monstrous geniuses, but I've never seen anyone like little friend Chu, who can be called the #1 monstrous genius since ancient times. No one can compare to you. Senior, you're overpraising me. However, I'm not sure if I'll have the strength of a king realm after breaking through," Chu Mu said. "Moreover, it's easier to raise Yuan Qi cultivation, but it's too difficult to raise the cultivation of a saint body. Little friend Chu, I've called you here to talk about this. Naturally, I have a way to raise your cultivation," the blood-slaughtering king said. "However, I hope that after you raise your cultivation and have the strength of a king realm expert, you can work together with the 7 of us to resolve the danger." "I'll try my best," Chu Mu said. He didn't know what the danger was, but he knew that it wasn't easy to raise his strength to the level of a peerless expert. With the help of a peerless expert, it would naturally be much faster. This was an opportunity. With opportunities came dangers. It was very normal. There was no such thing as a free lunch in the world. "All right. The blood-slaughtering king smiled. Senior, a king realm expert is a peerless expert, right? Chumu asked. He wanted to confirm. After all, he had always thought that a king realm expert was equivalent to a peerless expert. When the blood-slaughtering king said that, he didn't mention a peerless expert. I forgot that little friend Shu came from the outside world. The blood-slaughtering king said, in the outside world, a king realm expert from the land of exile is indeed called a peerless expert. Senior, can you explain to me the difference between a peerless expert and a saint realm expert? Chumu asked again. In the past, his strength was too far away from that of a peerless expert. Knowing too much wouldn't do him any good. But now it was different. His strength was infinitely close to that of a peerless expert. Just one more step and he would step into the realm of a peerless expert. Of course, it was only his strength that had stepped into the realm of a peerless expert. However, knowing more about a peerless expert was always beneficial. Right now there was a good opportunity. Little friend Chu, do you know why there are only 7 kings in the land of exile? There has never been an 8th king? The blood-slaughtering king asked. However, Chu Mu didn't know about this matter. The 7 kings are an inheritance. Without a suitable inheritance, it's impossible for others to become a king realm expert. The blood-slaughtering king smiled bitterly. The inheritance of the 7 kings can only be passed on to one person at a time. After the inheritance, a new 7 kings will appear. The previous 7 kings won't appear again. They will go into seclusion in order to improve themselves. However, after countless years of inheritance, the previous 7 kings didn't seem to have made any progress. Could it be that to become a peerless expert, one must pass on an inheritance? Chumu frowned. He thought of the peerless experts in the deep blue world. There was no such thing as an inheritance. No, the reason why the 7 kings need an inheritance is because their cultivation techniques are incomplete. They can only rely on an inheritance to become a peerless expert. The blood-slaughtering king said, the difference between a peerless expert and a saint lies in the refinement of the power of law. There's a saying called the 9 stars of the saint realm, the 5 refinements of the peerless realm. As the name implies, a saint realm expert is divided into 9 stars and 9 levels. A peerless expert is divided into 5 refinements and 5 levels. With a suitable cultivation technique, one can raise their cultivation to the peak of the 9 heavenly layers of the Aeon and refine their yuan force to the limit. Then, they can use their yuan force to refine the power of law they have comprehended, making it purer and more condensed. After refining it once, the power of law will undergo a qualitative change. Stepping into the realm of a peerless expert is called the first refinement. The second refinement is called the second refinement, and the 5th refinement is the pinnacle. A saint realm expert's yuan force is the main and the laws are secondary. However, a peerless expert's yuan force is the main and yuan force is secondary. After the 5th refinement, the yuan force is completely integrated into the laws. The blood-slaughtering king continued, the difference between each refinement of a peerless expert is huge. After each refinement, the difficulty will increase by several folds. Without enough talent, perseverance, and luck, it will be difficult to succeed. Hearing the blood-slaughtering king's explanation, Chu Mu finally understood that the difference between a peerless expert and a saint realm expert was so obvious. Yuan force laws. If I continue to develop like this, if I become a great emperor or holy emperor, will I also use laws as the main source of power? Chu Mu guessed silently before tossing this thought aside. Although a peerless expert was close at hand, there was still a huge gap between them. Breaking through wasn't that easy, let alone a great emperor or a saint emperor who was above a peerless expert. Moreover, a peerless expert had the 5th refinement. Each refinement was more difficult than the last. How many peerless experts had reached the 1st refinement but were unable to break through to the 2nd refinement? I wonder which refinement the seventh king has reached? Chumu thought. However, he didn't say it out loud. After all, this was someone else's secret. If he rashly asked about it, it might cause the other party to dislike him. Little friend Chu, do you have any other questions? The blood-slaughtering king was very polite. A genius like Chumu, whose cultivation hadn't reached the peak of the saint realm, but whose strength was already infinitely close to the king realm, was simply unprecedented. Although it was due to the fact that he cultivated both the Yuan Force Dao and the Saint Physique Dao, it was still very shocking. Once the Yuan Force Dao and the Saint Physique Dao both reached the peak of the Saint Realm, he would definitely possess the strength of a King Realm expert. Once such a person reached the peak of the Saint Realm, his strength would be even more unimaginable. Such a person had a boundless future. It was worth befriending. Of course, this was also because the blood-slaughtering king was broad-minded. Not everyone was broad-minded. Narrow-minded people would be jealous of a monstrous genius like Chu Mu. They might even kill him without hesitation. Life was full of different things. Everyone had their own personality and differences. Not for the time being. Thank you, Senior, for clearing my doubts. Chu Mu saluted. Perhaps, when he returned to the Deep Blue World and the True Sword sect, he would be able to find the senior elder and ask him everything. However, that was a matter for many years in the future. Since that's the case, Qianjun, bring little friend Chu to the Essence Blood Pool to cultivate. Do your best to increase your strength within 3 years, said the blood-slaughtering king. Chapter 1868. The Blood Essence Pool was one of the most important cultivation grounds in the Slaughtering Blood Hall. The 7 kings' inheritances were all different. The Slaughtering Blood Hall focused on the Saint Physique Dao, and the Slaughtering Blood King was a peerless expert of the Saint Physique Dao. Perhaps his cultivation level was not as high as the other 6 kings, but when it came to battle, his strength was not inferior at all. It was said that the Blood Essence Pool was brought here by the first-generation Slaughtering Blood King. It was a rare treasure that belonged to the Saint Physique Dao cultivators. It could continuously produce blood essence. This blood essence contained a pure and majestic energy that could be absorbed to a large extent to strengthen the cultivator's blood qi. To the Saint Physique Dao cultivators, blood qi was extremely important. With vigorous blood qi, one's body would become stronger, and it would promote the refinement and improvement of the Saint Physique. Since it was a treasure of the Slaughtering Blood Hall, it was extremely important. Not every disciple of the Slaughtering Blood Hall could enjoy it. Only the Slaughtering Blood King, young Master Tu Qianjun, and a few other important experts had the qualifications to cultivate in the Blood Essence Pool. However, they could not cultivate in it all the time, and there was a time limit. Every time the Blood Essence Pool opened, it was only suitable for one person to enter. Today, it was opened specifically for Chu Mu. Chu Mu was immersed in the Blood Essence Pool. Below his head, his entire body was immersed in a bright red color. Feeling the majestic blood qi in the blood-red liquid around him, he was extremely shocked. He did not expect the Slaughtering Blood Hall to have such a cultivation ground. The Blood Essence Pool was not big, only about 1 zhang long and 1 zhang wide. It was also not very deep. If one was slightly shorter, their entire body would be submerged. For people like Chu Mu, who was above average in height, it was just enough for his head to be exposed. The blood in the pool didn't smell fishy at all. Instead, it carried a faint fragrance. It smelled very good. Chu Mu could feel the boundless blood aura enter his body bit by bit, strengthening his own blood aura. After the blood aura in the Essence Blood Pool was used up, new blood aura would emerge from the bottom and all around, replenishing the consumed blood aura bit by bit, forming a balance. The energy is very rich and gentle. Chu Mu thought to himself. Although the cultivation effect of the Blood Essence Pool was far inferior to that of the Berserk Sacred Blood in a short period of time, it won in terms of gentleness and endurance. In 3 years, my sacred body will definitely be able to reach an even higher level. Chu Mu thought to himself as his eyes flickered with light. 3 years was the time the Blood Slaughterer King had given Chu Mu. Because they had to leave in 3 years, Chu Mu had to cultivate as hard as he could in these 3 years to truly possess the power of a peerless expert. Chu Mu wasn't sure, but he could only try his best. In 3 years, I can improve my origin force by myself, but it's hard to say if I can reach the peak of the immemorial 9th celestial layer. I can only work on the Saint Body Tao. After speaking, Chu Mu closed his eyes and wholeheartedly absorbed the boundless blood aura in the essence blood pool to strengthen his own blood aura and refine his sacred body, strengthening it. His sacred body, which had stagnated at the late stage of level 8, began to improve bit by bit. King Realm. Tu Qianjun sighed as he turned to leave after bringing Chu Mu into the blood essence pool. He was the Blood Slaughterer King's successor, which meant that he would receive the Blood Slaughterer King's inheritance in the future and become the new Blood Slaughterer King. This was a good thing. At that time, he would be one of the 7 strongest people in the land of exile. This had always been a recognition, and it was engraved in his heart. But now Tu Qianjun was a little dispirited. Chu Mu wasn't the successor of the 7 kings. He had relied on his own efforts to increase his cultivation base and strength, becoming stronger and stronger. In this regard, Chu Mu had completely surpassed the 6 stars. They had to rely on the inheritance to obtain the strength of a King Realm expert. Of course, after obtaining the inheritance, they would truly enter the King Realm. But Chu Mu could obtain the strength of a King Realm expert when he was in the Saint Realm. Thinking about it, it was unbelievable. The gap between a King Realm expert and a Saint Realm expert wasn't as simple as a gap of a few times. It was very difficult to bridge. At least, in the many years of history of the land of exile, there had never been a monster like Chu Mu, who could be said to be heaven-defying. There was no comparison. There was really no comparison. The two were not on the same level at all. Even so, Tu Qianjun didn't want to fall too far behind. Cultivate in seclusion. Tu Qianjun's eyes were burning with a blazing flame. The current Chu Mu was already qualified to talk to the 7 kings. In terms of status, he was indeed above the 6 stars. Not only Tu Qianjun was cultivating in seclusion, but the other 5 stars were also cultivating in seclusion, trying their best to increase their strength. They were the successors of the future King Realm expert. They couldn't be too inferior to others. Speaking of which, it was funny. In the past, the successors of the current King Realm experts were definitely in the top ranks in terms of talent. They should be completely above others. They didn't expect that Chu Mu would appear and directly suppress them. Fortunately, Chu Mu was a friend and not an enemy. After making arrangements for Chu Mu, the Blood Butcher King quickly left the Blood Butcher Hall and entered the land of exile. However, the direction he was heading wasn't towards Sin City. With the strength of a King Realm expert, even if he didn't fly, his speed was still very shocking. It was several times faster than a bright Yang Realm expert. The Blood Butcher King flew close to the ground for a month. It would take him 2 to 3 years to fly a premium shuttle. After arriving at his destination, the Blood Butcher King found the entrance to an underground cave. He quickly entered it and advanced without any obstructions. This was because the sinners in this underground cave had already been cleared out by the 7 kings. Very quickly, the Blood Butcher King entered the 2nd floor of the cave, then quickly entered the 3rd floor. The 1st floor belonged to the Black Iron Sinners, the 2nd floor belonged to the Bronze Sinners, and the 3rd floor belonged to the Silver Sinners. However, no matter how powerful the Silver Sinners were, they were as weak as ants before a king-level powerhouse. However, this cave didn't only have 3 floors. There was also a 4th floor. Logically speaking, the cave on the 4th floor should belong to the gold-level sinners. In reality, this wasn't absolute. The 4th floor mainly belonged to the powerful Silver Sinners. It was similar to the 3 great powerhouses of the human sword cultivators. This discovery shocked the 7 kings. If this group of sinners appeared on the ground, it would definitely bring a great disaster to the human sword cultivators. They would all be wiped out. After going deeper into the fourth floor, they were even more shocked. This was because they discovered gold sinners. Gold sinners had the strength of a king realm expert. The 7 kings used all their strength to kill all of the gold sinners. Now they were faced with a great crisis that was difficult to resolve. Very quickly, the Blood Butcher King arrived at the destination. The other 6 kings were all there. They formed a circle around a huge golden cocoon. The golden cocoon was 3 meters tall, and its entire body seemed to be woven from golden threads. Each thread gave off a very tough feeling. Inside the golden cocoon, one could vaguely see a strong figure curled up. A shocking aura was contained within. It was like a heart that was slowly beating. Every time it beat, it would absorb a certain amount of aura from the surroundings. When the Blood Butcher King arrived, he immediately stared at the golden cocoon. His expression changed slightly. "This guy's aura has become even stronger," the Blood Butcher King said. "Yes, it can only last for about 3 more years," the Silver King said. "If we didn't do our best to stop it from absorbing energy, it would probably break out of the cocoon in less than a year. When that time comes, it will be a disaster for the land of exile," the Flowing Light King said. There was a hint of worry in his voice. Although the other kings looked calm, there was a hint of worry in their eyes. The 5 cities were their root. They could accept the destruction caused by the internal strife of the human race. However, they had to put an end to the attacks from the outside, especially from the sinners who were too powerful to resist. The golden cocoon that they surrounded would give birth to an extremely powerful gold-level sinner. Its strength would be even greater than the other gold-level sinners, surpassing any of the 7 kings. Even if the 7 of them worked together, they were not confident that they could defeat and kill the sinner. This was a strong enemy, an unprecedentedly strong enemy. It was also a great crisis. A crisis of life and death that not only concerned the 7 kings, but also the countless humans in the 5 cities. "Everyone, when I returned this time, I made a very shocking discovery," the Blood Butcher King said. The 6 kings all looked at him. "Do you still know Chumu?" The Blood Butcher King didn't keep them in suspense. He quickly said, "It's like this." The blood-slaughtering king quickly recounted everything that had happened after the 7 kings had left. "Sword Devil Feng Wui's strength was second only to us, but he died under Chu Mu's sword. I've seen Chu Mu's cultivation and tested his strength. Late 9th celestial level Yuan Li and late 8th level Saint Body. His strength is infinitely close to the king level. I think that if Chu Mu's cultivation increases again, he might be able to reach the king level when he reaches the saint level," the Blood Butcher King said. The Blood Slaughter King said. The 6 kings all stared with wide eyes, their shock completely showing on their faces. They didn't hide it at all, so I opened up the essence blood pool for Chu Mu to cultivate. I gave him 3 years to try to raise his cultivation as much as possible. Perhaps when his sacred body reaches the 9th rank, he will have true king rank strength. Even if it's just the beginning, he can still ally with us. Okay. If Chu Mu can have the strength of a king level, we can set up the 8 saints' everlasting formation. Perhaps we can kill the gold sinner that's about to appear," the mysterious king said. "I'll stay here for now and try to buy some time. When the time comes, I'll bring Chu Mu here to familiarize himself with the 8 saints' everlasting formation. We'll make sure it's safe," the Blood Butcher King said. He also sat down cross-legged and surrounded the golden cocoon. He released his power to further isolate his aura and prevent the golden cocoon from absorbing power. Chapter 1869. In the depths of the cave on the 4th level, the giant golden cocoon pulsed again and again. Every time it pulsed, it would absorb the surrounding energy. However, under the efforts of the 7 kings, the amount of energy it absorbed was greatly reduced. However, the 7 kings could only stop a portion of it. They could not stop it completely. The gold sinners in the giant golden cocoon would appear sooner or later. Now, they could only place a part of their hope on Chu Mu. They hoped that he could have the strength of a king in 3 years. Only then would they have a chance to join forces and kill the powerful gold sinners. In the essence blood pool in the depths of the slaughtering blood hall, Chu Mu closed his eyes and immersed himself in the essence blood pool, cultivating wholeheartedly. In the past 3 years, he had put aside the cultivation of origin power and swordsmanship. He had spent all his time on the cultivation of his saint body. The essence blood pool was full of vigor and boundless. Chu Mu's saint body had broken through from the late stage of level 8 to the peak of level 8. Now, he was continuously increasing his strength, preparing to break through to level 9. The influence of the Sword Demon sect on the 5 cities gradually weakened with the passage of time. However, the Sword Demon sect had caused great damage. More than a dozen camps had been destroyed, and some forces in the 5 cities had been annihilated. Such a loss could not be recovered in a short period of time. At this time, the 5 cities and the surrounding camps seemed to have 1,000 things to do. The young geniuses were all stimulated and went into seclusion to cultivate, striving to improve their cultivation. Perhaps because of the pressure from the outside world, their seclusion was quite effective. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, more than 2 years had passed. In the essence blood pool, Chu Mu's aura was constantly pulsing, causing the blood in the essence blood pool to ripple. Break! A low roar, yet it was like rolling thunder that shook the inside and outside of his body. His chi and blood surged like a great river that endlessly battered his body. It was also like a huge wave that came wave after wave. Waves of roars constantly came out from Chu Mu's body. The aura on his body grew stronger and stronger. A burning heat constantly spread out from his body, as if there was a raging fire burning in his body. His chi and blood were of the yang attribute. His chi and blood were vigorous and full of yang energy. In fact, when one's chi and blood reached a certain level, the power of chi and blood that was emitted would produce a terrifyingly high temperature. It could easily melt steel into molten iron and turn hardwood into charcoal. As the temperature of Chu Mu's chi and blood continued to rise, the temperature of the blood essence pool that he was in contact with also rose along with it. Wisps of white aura filled the air, spiraling upwards and steaming. The impact of chi and blood became more and more intense. In one go they attacked, and attacked. Chu Mu's skin turned red, expanding and contracting. As it continued to surge, it rapidly absorbed the blood chi from the essence blood pool to replenish itself. It accumulated strength and launched attacks again and again. The shackles between the peak of grade 8 and grade 9 were finally broken under Chu Mu's repeated attack. Suddenly, the chi and blood in his body produced an extremely powerful suction force, instantly absorbing the majestic blood chi from the essence blood pool around him. It was like a whirlwind sweeping away clouds, causing the color of the essence blood pool to fade in an instant. However, the power at the bottom of the essence blood pool continued to replenish itself, and the color of the essence blood pool quickly returned to its original state. Waves of powerful force rushed through his body. Chu Mu felt as if he could pick the stars and the moon with a raise of his hand. He could shatter mountains and crack the earth with one punch. This was the power of an initial grade 9 sacred body. It was extremely powerful. With the breakthrough of the sacred body, the vitality in his body also increased. Light injuries could be healed instantly, and serious injuries could be healed in just a few breaths. Even broken limbs could be regrown in a short period of time, just like before. The power of the sacred body has increased by many times. There are still a few months left. It's impossible to raise the sacred body to the middle grade 9 sacred body. However, I can consolidate it and convert the increased power into strength, Chu Mu thought. He continued to cultivate, familiarizing himself with the increased power. This was not a short period of improvement from taking elixirs. It was an improvement accumulated over more than 2 years. Hence, it would be easier to master it. Little friend Chu, time's up. It's time to come out. A voice rang out above the essence blood pool and entered Chu Mu's ears. It was the blood-slaughtering king's voice. Chu Mu leaped out of the essence blood pool. A long robe immediately appeared on his body. When he landed, the door outside the essence blood pool opened. Chu Mu's body flashed and he left the essence blood pool. Not bad. Although your Yuan Qi cultivation is still at the late grade 9 eternal celestial layer, it's much more refined than 3 years ago. In a few more years you will definitely reach the peak. The blood-slaughtering king's eyes flickered. He looked deeply at Chu Mu and nodded in admiration. Your sacred body has also reached the early grade 9 eternal celestial layer and has stabilized. The current you may have the strength of a king. I can feel that my strength has increased a lot, but I don't know what level it has reached, Chu Mu said. You'll know when we fight. The blood-slaughtering king laughed. Immediately, he attacked. His palm was like a sword. He raised it and slashed down. It was a very simple movement, but a blood-red sword light appeared instantly. The sword light was extremely condensed, as if it was made of metal. This slash did not have a huge momentum. All the power was restrained, and it did not affect the surroundings at all. However, Chu Mu could feel the terrifying power contained in the blood-red sword light. It was enough to instantly kill an expert at the peak of the bright yang celestial layer. Even the sword devil Feng Wui could not resist it when he used all his strength. In other words, the blood-slaughtering king's slash could also instantly kill Chu Mu, who was at the late grade 9 eternal celestial layer and had a late grade 8 eternal celestial layer. This attack had completely surpassed the bright yang celestial layer and the so-called half-king level. If it was in the past, Chu Mu would have felt that he could not resist. Just the aura alone was enough to suppress him. However, at this moment, he only felt some pressure. He opened his right hand and clenched it tightly. The blaze spiritual sword appeared. He raised it up, and it turned into a fierce fiery red sword light. It burned with spiritual flames and attacked the blood-red sword light. They collided and resisted. Both sides were worn down and finally collapsed. That attack just now was equivalent to the attack of an exceptional first refinement expert. If you can resist it, it means that your current strength has already reached the level of an exceptional first refinement expert. The blood-slaughtering king said. Chu Mu's current realm was only the saint rank. However, his strength had far surpassed the saint rank. In one leap, he had reached a level where he could contend against absolute expert. Even if he had just stepped into the first refinement absolute expert level, he was still considered an absolute expert's strength. It's a pity. If you had more time, you could raise your Yuan Qi cultivation to the extreme, and then raise your sage body cultivation to the extreme. Your strength would definitely be stronger than an exceptional first refinement expert. You might even reach the level of an exceptional second refinement expert. The blood-slaughtering king said. Hearing the blood-slaughtering king's words, Chu Mu was extremely excited. His purpose in entering the land of exile was to avoid the numerous experts in the deep blue world and raise his strength as much as possible. It would be best if he could reach the level where he could contend with an exceptional expert. However, Chu Mu wasn't sure if he could do it because it was too difficult. Since ancient times, there had never been anyone who had the strength of an exceptional expert before reaching the level of an exceptional expert. That was an unprecedented challenge. He had worked hard and now he had finally achieved it. Although he had only just reached the level of a peerless expert, he had really done it. Moreover, his cultivation had not reached the pinnacle of the saint level, and there was still room for improvement. Moreover, his sword will had not been included in his current strength. In other words, when Chu Mu could use his sword intent and his Yuan Qi and sage body cultivation reach the extreme of the saint realm, he would at least have the strength of an exceptional second refinement expert. Young friend Chu, since your strength has reached the king realm, follow me. The blood-slaughtering king said, "We can talk about other issues on the way." Okay. Chu Mu knew that the matter was urgent and couldn't be delayed. He immediately responded. Under the blood-slaughtering king's lead, the two quickly left the blood-slaughtering manor and blood-slaughtering city. Now that Chu Mu's strength had increased, his speed had also increased. Although he still couldn't compare to the blood-slaughtering king, he was already far ahead of other bright young realm experts. The combination of Yuan Qi and Sage Body was a perfect combination of power. It turned into speed that propelled Chu Mu forward, allowing him to catch up to the blood-slaughtering king as much as possible. The blood-slaughtering king also reduced his speed so that he wouldn't fall too far behind Chu Mu. Young friend Chu, many years ago, the seven of us discovered a gold-rank sinner. After chasing it for a while, we followed it into an underground cave. That cave had a total of 4 floors. The blood-slaughtering king explained the situation to Chu Mu as he led the way. The 7 of us killed our way into the cave and cleared out all the sinners. We even killed the gold-rank sinners on the 4th floor. However, there was a huge golden cocoon that was nurturing a gold-rank sinner. Even with the 7 of us working together, we couldn't do anything to the golden cocoon. Not only were we unable to destroy it, the power of our attacks was absorbed by the golden cocoon, accelerating the nurturing of the gold-rank sinner. Is that gold-rank sinner very powerful? Chu Mu asked. Yes. Although it hasn't been nurtured yet, its aura let us know that the gold-rank sinner is definitely very powerful. It's much more powerful than the gold-rank sinners we've killed. The blood-slaughtering king said, "Let's put it this way. Among the gold-rank sinners we've killed, the strongest one was only at the initial 2nd refinement, while the 7 of us are at the 2nd refinement. However, the gold-rank sinner that hasn't been nurtured yet is estimated to be at the 3rd or 4th refinement at the very least. Once it's born, we won't be able to resist it. It'll definitely bring a calamity to the 5 great cities." "Seniors, you must have a countermeasure, right?" Chu Mu asked in astonishment. "Of course," the blood-slaughtering king replied and explained. Chapter 1870. Under the Blood Butcher King's lead, Chu Mu quickly entered the underground cavern and reached the 4th floor. He saw the other 6 kings of the 7 kings, and also saw the giant golden cocoon surrounded by the 6 kings. With a thump, the cocoon beat like a heart, but with a powerful aura that was like the rumbling of a drum. The aura was shocking. In an instant, Chu Mu felt as if his own heart was also affected. A wave of power quickly spread out as the giant golden cocoon beat like a heart. When it passed through the 6 kings, it was clearly blocked. Only a small part of it entered the giant golden cocoon and was absorbed. "That's the king of the gold sinners," Chu Mu thought. Along the way, the Blood Butcher King's explanation made Chu Mu understand what kind of danger the land of exile was facing. Once the gold sinners in the giant golden cocoon came out, their powerful strength would break through the combined forces of the 7 kings. They would even injure and kill the 7 kings. Then, they would lead the army of sinners to the surface and bring disaster to the land of exile. When that time came, no one would be able to stop the Gold Sinner King. All humans would become food for the sinners. Chu Mu stared deeply at the giant golden cocoon. When he saw the figure inside the golden cocoon, he knew that the Gold Sinner King's strength was definitely very, very strong, far stronger than his own. Moreover, the figure was becoming clearer and clearer, as if it was about to break out of the cocoon. "Everyone, I've brought Chu Mu here. I can confirm that he now has the strength of the 1st refinement," the Blood Butcher King quickly said. "All right. Let's skip the pleasantries. Young Chu Mu, this is the content of the 8 Saints' everlasting formation. Memorize it first and try to comprehend it as soon as possible," the mysterious king said. He took out a piece of jade and threw it to Chu Mu. After Chu Mu received the jade, he did not bother with pleasantries. He knew that time was of the essence, so he immediately released the power of his soul to receive the information within the jade. The Eight Saints' everlasting formation was a battle formation. It was a top-notch battle formation among saint-level battle formations. It required 8 people to set it up at the same time. It was best if the people setting up the formation were close to each other in terms of strength. Only then would its power reach its peak. Of course, the 7 kings were all second refinement peerless powerhouses, while Chu-Mu had only just entered the first refinement. The difference between the first refinement and second refinement was very obvious. Even if he laid down the 8 saints' everlasting formation, he would not be able to fully unleash the power of the battle formation. Of course, it was still better than Chu-Mu, who was not even at the first refinement. However, there was another drawback. The 7 kings had studied the 8 saints' everlasting formation before, and were already familiar with it. Chu-Mu, on the other hand, had only just come into contact with it. So, he didn't have enough time to comprehend it properly. So, it was enough for him to gain a basic understanding of it. However, the 8 saints' everlasting formation was extremely profound and mysterious. It was extremely difficult to comprehend it, and it was not that easy to comprehend it. The 7 kings were not confident that they would be able to unleash enough power in the end. They only hoped that they could successfully set up the formation and unleash a portion of its power. The Blood Slaughterer King quickly sat down and tried his best to stop the golden cocoon from absorbing the energy. He was trying his best to buy time for Chu-Mu. In the blink of an eye, a few days had passed in this tense atmosphere. The golden cocoon pulsed once again. This time, the pulsation was unprecedentedly powerful. With a series of thumping sounds, it caused the surroundings to tremble. The 7 kings' expressions changed greatly. The figure in the golden cocoon began to move. Although it was very slow, its movements were very clear. The strength of the giant golden cocoon continued to converge into the figure, entering it bit by bit. The figure became increasingly clear. Soon after, the figure viciously grabbed at the giant golden cocoon. Amidst an ear-piercing sound, it directly tore the giant golden cocoon apart and extended an arm. The golden arm was filled with a strong sense of power, and it was filled with a sense of oppression. It's out! What a strong aura! It's at least at the 3rd refinement and it's still getting stronger. Attack, injure it first! The 7 kings said one after another. Without holding back, they directly drew their swords. Sword light of different colors mercilessly slashed out, centered on the golden sinner king that was about to break out of the cocoon. 7 tyrannical sword light that made Chu-Mu's scalp tingle hit its target. The golden cocoon immediately shattered. As the light shone in all directions, a tall and strong figure appeared, standing in the center. It was as if it was standing between heaven and earth, looking up to a mountain. A soul-stirring roar was heard, and the sound waves spread out. To a certain extent, it slightly restrained the 7 sword light, causing them to pause for a moment. Then, the golden sinner king's body flashed and turned. In an instant, it shuttled out of the 7 sword light and turned into a stream of light, shooting towards one of the 7 kings. The silver king blocked and was hit by the sword. He was sent flying. He felt his whole body trembling, as if his bones and muscles were about to break. His chest was stuffy, and his chi and blood were turbulent. The difference between the 3rd refinement and the 2nd refinement was too obvious. As time passed, the golden sinner king's aura became stronger and stronger, constantly approaching the peak of the 3rd refinement. Surround it. Not daring to give the golden sinner king a chance to chase after the silver king, the other 6 kings immediately attacked with their swords. The power of laws constantly fluctuated, surrounding the area. However, the golden sinner king was not afraid to counterattack. Every strike contained a terrifying power, sending all 6 kings flying. Chu-Mu seized the opportunity and attacked with his sword. The sword light was incomparably sharp and mysterious. It could not be dodged. It hit the golden sinner king's body, and under the eruption of the tyrannical sword chi, it immediately repelled the golden sinner king. However, the Golden Sinner King did not show any signs of injury. Although the sword did not injure the Golden Sinner King, it had restrained its attack, buying time for the 7 kings to recover. Set up the formation, King Xuanmiao growled and quickly moved. In the blink of an eye, the 7 kings and Chu Mu each stood in a position, forming a circle, surrounding the Golden Sinner King in the center. A mysterious aura emanated from the 8 of them, quickly connecting with each other as if they were one. It was incomparably tough. Chu Mu immediately felt his power rising, becoming more and more powerful, far exceeding what he originally possessed. This was the 8 Saints' everlasting formation's support for his strength. Great! The 7 kings were pleasantly surprised. Their surprised gazes swept over Chu Mu. Originally, they thought that Chu Mu's mastery of the 8 Saints' everlasting formation was already good enough. However, now that he had set it up, it was not just mastering the 8 Saints' everlasting formation. It had even surpassed the small mastery and was close to Deshang's. Such talent and comprehension were truly terrifying. The Golden Sinner King attacked with both arms, instantly punching out with both fists. The golden fists were like the roar of an angry dragon, shattering the void. Such a tyrannical punch was extremely powerful. If it were any of the 7 kings, they would not be able to withstand it and would definitely be severely injured. The 8 Saints' everlasting formation was activated, and the 8 of them quickly moved as if they were one. They attacked with their swords, and the sharp and powerful sword light immediately cut open the golden fists. The Golden Sinner King's eyes shone with a frightening light as its fists failed. "Humans, all of you must die." Its voice was obscure and extremely cold. It was as if it could freeze everything in an instant. The golden light on its body became even more intense, and its aura finally stabilized at the pinnacle of the 3rd refinement, infinitely close to the 4th refinement. Fortunately, it did not reach the 4th refinement. The 7 kings secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Infinitely close to the 4th refinement and truly reaching the 4th refinement were 2 different concepts. There was a clear gap in strength between the two, and this gap was difficult to make up for. Get rid of it. The 7 kings did not find it strange that the Golden Sinner King could speak, because they already knew that the Golden Sinner King possessed great intelligence, and it was normal for it to speak the human language. The 8 Saints' everlasting formation was activated, and the 7 kings and Chu Mu attacked with their swords in a rhythmic manner. The besieged Golden Sinner King could not break out of the encirclement. It could only counterattack. It had no intention of dodging. Instead, it used its incomparably strong body to withstand the sword attacks of the crowd. It seized the opportunity to counterattack with incomparable ferocity. Its power could easily destroy mountains and shatter the earth. Bang, 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 bang. Every collision produced astonishing sounds. The caverns of the 4th floor were made of extremely pure silverstone, while the deeper levels became golden stone. The hardness of the golden stone was far greater than that of the silver stone. Even the swords of bright young powerhouses would not be able to cause much damage to the golden stone. However, at this very moment, the golden stone in the surroundings and under the feet of the Golden Sinner King was being sliced apart by the sword chi of the group and the fist force of the Golden Sinner King. Chu Mu unleashed his strength to his heart's content, using his own strength to drive the power of the 8 Saints' everlasting formation. He used his sword techniques, and with the heart and sword as one, his sword was extremely accurate, striking the Golden Sinner King's body time and time again. Originally, his sword would not have been able to penetrate the Golden Sinner King's defenses, but with the support of the 8 Saints' everlasting formation, the power of his sword techniques increased drastically. Every strike would break through the Golden Sinner King's tough golden skin, but the damage was limited. The 7 kings' swords could also injure the Golden Sinner King, but the damage was limited as well. Under the 8 Saints' everlasting formation, everyone's strength was gathered together before being amplified to a certain extent, and it was distributed equally to everyone. The Golden Sinner King's presence was extremely powerful, suppressing the surroundings. Under normal circumstances, any one of the 7 kings would be affected by the presence, and they would probably only be able to use 70% of their strength. However, under the formation, the Golden Sinner King's presence was completely nullified, so it was useless. Even so, they could still sense the terrifying presence constantly attacking them. Fight, 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 fight. This was a matter of life and death, as well as the lives of countless people in the 5 cities and several dozen camps on the surface. They could not afford to be careless or hesitate. Chu Mu and the 7 kings unleashed their full strength, swinging their swords without holding back at all. To the Golden Sinner King, this was a matter of life and death, as well as the future of the sinners. As a result, it unleashed all of its strength and fought back as hard as it could, fighting for a future for itself and its race. This battle had nothing to do with justice or evil. It was only a battle for the future of the race. Chapter 1871. The 5 cities once again entered a period of stable development. There were many things waiting to be done as new forces appeared or moved in. Some were cultivating in seclusion, some were training outside, and some were doing business. Everyone had their own duties, but from their expressions, one could feel a trace of relaxation in the depths of their hearts. Yes, the sword demon sect that posed a serious threat to the 5 cities had already been destroyed. After experiencing this calamity, those who survived felt fortunate. However, they did not know that the sword demon sect's calamity was only a minor one. An even greater calamity was approaching. In the depths of the 4th floor of the underground cavern, the 7 kings and Chu Mu laid down the 8 saints' everlasting formation. They surrounded the Gold Sinner King, who had reached the peak of the 3rd refinement, to prevent it from leaving. They constantly attacked in an attempt to kill it. The roars were endless, and the sound waves blasted out. The Gold Sinner King waved his arms, stirring up the surroundings. The air became as viscous as water, and an incomparably terrifying pressure appeared. Wave after wave, it was endless and boundless as it blasted out in all directions. As the Gold Sinner King continued to exert its power, its aura became stronger and stronger. The pressure also became stronger and stronger. Chu Mu and the 7 kings' expressions became serious. They did not dare to be distracted in the slightest. They tried their best to maintain the 8 saints' everlasting formation, because the slightest carelessness would cause it to break. As the 8 saints' everlasting formation operated, the 8 of them became more and more familiar with each other. Chu Mu's understanding of the 8 saints' everlasting formation deepened. The Gold Sinner's weakness is the same as the other sinners. It's the heart. Attack its heart and dig it out. That'll be enough to kill it, King Mysterious transmitted his voice to Chu Mu. Chu Mu nodded. With both swords in hand, he locked onto the Gold Sinner King's heart and took the opportunity to attack. However, the Gold Sinner King's golden membrane had astonishing defensive power. It was incomparably tough. Chu Mu's swords only caused light injuries. They could not penetrate it at all, let alone the heart. The Gold Sinner King counterattacked with a punch. Under the golden fist, a vacuum was formed. Its terrifying power could instantly shatter a mountain as it ruthlessly attacked Chu Mu. Chu Mu grasped the trajectory of the heart sword, but he found it difficult to dodge. The Gold Sinner King's punch had a great momentum. It was as though the world was in his fist. Even Chu Mu could feel the trajectory. He was enveloped in all directions. He could only take it head-on. The 2 swords crossed, and a cross-shaped sword light instantly slashed out. Blazing like the radiance of the sun, they instantly collided. Immediately after, Chu Mu raised his sword vertically and used Lonely Peak everlasting sword technique to defend. With a boom, an incomparably powerful force erupted from the point of collision between the golden fist and the sword. The impact spread out in all directions, and Chu Mu only felt an incomparably domineering force that instantly impacted the sword. The spirit sword seemed to be unable to withstand this overbearing and powerful force, and issued a mournful cry. The powerful and domineering force passed through the sword and impacted Chu Mu's palm, causing his palm to tremble. His 5 fingers seemed to have been hit by a giant hammer, and even his arm trembled from the impact. Chu Mu reacted quickly. He hurriedly used the diversion technique to divert this powerful force. He then guided part of the force to the ground under his feet, causing cracks to appear and quickly spread out. If it were any other time, such a powerful punch from the Gold Sinner King would have blown Chu Mu apart, not to mention blocking it. Even if his divine body had reached the peak of level 9, it would have been useless. The difference was too great. However, under the 8 Saints' everlasting formation, Chu Mu's strength had been greatly enhanced. Although there was still a gap between him and the Gold Sinner King, the gap was not that big. After resisting the Gold Sinner King's punch, the 7 King's swords all attacked the Gold Sinner King. The secret sword killer moves of their respective inheritances were performed without any pressure under their swords. They were as fast and smooth as ordinary sword technique. This was something that the 6 stars could not compare to. The difference was like heaven and earth. Moreover, the secret sword killer moves performed by the 6 stars had astonishing momentum. One could tell at a glance that they were very powerful. The same secret sword killer moves performed by the 7 kings were different. There was no momentum, and all the power was completely contained within the sword. It turned into a sword light and shot out. The sword light made Chu Mu feel as if it was a whole new world. With the strength of the 2nd refinement and the power of the 8 Saints' everlasting formation, the power of each of the 7 kings' secret sword killer moves was enough to threaten the Gold Sinner King. The Gold Sinner King's expression did not change, but his eyes were extremely cold. The golden light on his body became thicker and spread out rapidly. It then gathered in an instant, turning into a simple and even crude armor that covered his body. It formed the outermost layer of protection and blocked the 7 Kings' secret sword killer move. The armor shattered, but the Gold Sinner King's body did not suffer much damage and recovered instantly. This scene made the 7 Kings' expressions become very serious. The Gold Sinner King had a strong body and superb self-healing ability. More importantly, the Gold Sinner King's strength was above theirs. If it were not for the 8 Saints' everlasting formation that boosted the strength of the 8 of them, they would not have been able to resist at all. Even so, they could not kill the Gold Sinner King. They could only trap him. Now, it had become a tug-of-war. However, if they consumed too much of their strength, the Gold Sinner King might find an opportunity to break out of the encirclement. Once he broke out, they would not be able to stop him. The sinners had amazing endurance. No matter how they fought, their strength would not be reduced. It was impossible to wear down the Gold Sinner King's strength through attrition. Now there was only one thing, and that was that they had to kill the Gold Sinner King. They had to have absolute strength and strength. How could they have enough strength to kill the Gold Sinner King? An extremely strong defense and astonishing self-healing ability. Perhaps they had to have the strength of the 4th refinement to be able to kill the Gold Sinner King. Right now, we are not strong enough. We can only trap the Gold Sinner King temporarily. We have to think of a way to increase our strength and dig out the Gold Sinner King's heart, Flowing Light King said telepathically. Young friend Shu, you should have a secret technique that can instantly increase your strength, right? King Xuanmiao asked. Yes, 10 times, Chu Mu quickly replied telepathically. Good. With our current strength boosted by the battle formation, a 10-fold increase will allow us to reach the pinnacle of the 3rd refinement. However, this is still not enough to threaten the Gold Sinner King. Young friend Shu, let's maintain the 8 Saints' everlasting formation for a while and strive to let you have a deeper understanding of its mysteries. King Xuanmiao said. Wait until you have a certain level of understanding of the 8 Saints' everlasting formation, then use the final transformation of the 8 Saints' everlasting formation to concentrate its power on one of us, giving him the strength of the fourth refinement to kill the Gold Sinner King. Okay. Let's do that. The others all agreed. Although their strength would be depleted, it could be replenished. Maintaining the current formation and the stalemate with the Gold Sinner King would be able to last for quite some time. Chu Mu immediately felt the pressure. They were basically placing most of their hopes on him. However, this was a good feeling. Chu Mu had always been very confident in his comprehension ability. The Eight Saints' everlasting formation was an extremely profound battle formation. It could be said to be the pinnacle of saint-level formations. This was also the reason why the Seven Kings had taken a fancy to it. Chu Mu's comprehension ability was astonishing, even surpassing that of the Seven Kings. This was a fact. However, the Seven Kings had spent far more time immersed in the battle formation than Chu Mu. Chu Mu had only just unlocked the Eight Saints' everlasting formation. It was already extremely shocking that he could reach such a level. Since they wanted to let Chu Mu further familiarize himself with the Eight Saints' everlasting formation, the Seven Kings did not expend any extra energy to attack the Gold Sinner King. They only needed to surround him. This way, the consumption of energy would be reduced and the formation would last longer. After all, the Seven Kings were not certain how long Chu Mu would need to fully understand the Eight Saints' everlasting formation and grasp the final transformation. Only by fully comprehending the Eight Saints' everlasting formation and grasping the final transformation would he be able to unleash the final power of the Eight Saints' everlasting formation. Only then would he have any hope of killing the Gold Sinner King. In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. Although they did not use their full strength in this battle, it was still a high-intensity battle. The second day, the third day, the Gold Sinner King's temper seemed to have become very irritable. It could not kill anyone, nor could it break out of the encirclement. The long period of encirclement had made it very angry. However, its strength was only at the peak of the third refinement and not the fourth refinement. Otherwise, it would have been able to break out of the encirclement. On the fourth day, Chu Mu's voice was heard. "Seniors, I think I have fully understood the Eight Saints' everlasting formation. Good. There's no time to lose. Bring out your full strength immediately." However, who should the final transformation of the Eight Saints' everlasting formation focus its power on? The Seven Kings were about the same in terms of strength and fighting strength. They were all veteran experts, while Chu Mu was a new generation expert. Who should the final transformation of the formation focus its power on? After all, once the final transformation of the formation's power was concentrated, it meant that the strength of the other seven would quickly recover to their original level. At that time, if the Gold Sinner King seized the opportunity, it was very likely that they would be able to break out of the encirclement, and some of them might even be killed. This had to be guaranteed. Whoever received the final blessing of the Eight Saints' everlasting formation had to kill the Gold Sinner King in the shortest time possible. "Seniors, if you trust me, let me do it," Chu Mu said telepathically. "Young friend Chu, you should know the current situation." "I know, so please hold on for a while longer." "I will prove it to you," Chu Mu said. Under the state of the heart and sword as one, Chu Mu locked onto the Gold Sinner King's heart and looked for an opportunity to attack with both swords. The sharp sword light pierced through the void, crossing the void. Time and space could not stop it at all. It accurately hit the Gold Sinner King's heart, but it was not powerful enough to pierce through. After a few times, the Seven Kings understood. "Everyone, the power of the Eight Saints' everlasting transformation will be concentrated on young friend Chu," King Xuanmiao said. There was no objection, and he made the decision immediately. Chapter 1872. The Eight Saints' Limitless Change. This was the final transformation of the Eight Saints' limitless formation. It was also a transformation where all the power of the Eight Saints' limitless formation was concentrated on one person. The original Eight Saints' limitless formation's secret lay in the endless cycle of power. It could trap the target within, making it unable to break out. In the end, the target would be trapped and their power would be exhausted before being killed. However, the Golden Sinner King's endurance was astonishing. No matter how much they tried, it would be difficult for them to exhaust much of their power. On the other hand, if this went on for a long time, their power would be exhausted, and the Golden Sinner King would seize the opportunity to break out or even kill them all. Therefore, they could only use the final transformation of the 8 Saints' limitless formation. It was an extreme transformation where all the power was concentrated on one person. Chu Mu had used his 2 swords to prove that his attack could hit the Golden Sinner King's heart without missing, even if the Golden Sinner King was prepared. This was something that the 7 kings could not compare to. What they lacked now was enough power to break through the Golden Sinner King's astonishing defense. Now they were going to give Chu Mu such power. This was a gamble. If they won, everyone would be happy. If they lost, they would gamble with their lives, as well as the lives of millions of people in the 5 cities of the land of exile. Even though they understood, they were not afraid. They had nothing to fear. Everyone, secret technique, 8 Saints limitless change, King Xuanmiao said telepathically. Everyone immediately used the secret technique to increase their power. Chu Mu used the secret technique of Sword God's Descent. The 7 kings each had their own secret techniques that could instantly increase their power by 10 times. Of course, there would always be a price to pay after using the secret technique. However, as long as they could kill the Golden Sinner King and get rid of future troubles, it would be worth it. The final transformation of the 8 Saints' limitless formation began to be performed. Waves of aura surged like rivers flowing into a stream. All of them surged towards Chu Mu. Chu Mu only felt his power rising steadily, becoming more and more powerful as it surged within his body. If his sacred body had not reached the early stage of the 9th level, Chu Mu did not know if he could have withstood it. Waves of extremely powerful energy filled his body. It was countless times more powerful than his own body, and it was many times more powerful than the 8 Saints' everlasting formation. It had reached the level of the 4th refinement. The difference between each refinement of peerless powerhouses was very obvious, but this difference was reflected in the refinement of laws. At this moment, Chu Mu had not grasped the power of laws, or rather, he had given up on the power of laws. His strength was comparable to that of an exceptional 4th refinement expert. However, it was pure strength, a type of strength that filled his body. Exerting strength in his arms, his muscles immediately swelled up, as if a furious dragon was roaring within them. "Young friend Chu, it's up to you now," the 7 kings said. Under the effects of the 8 Saints' limitless change, their powers began to weaken rapidly. Perhaps in just a dozen breaths' time, they would return to their original level of 2nd refinement and continue to weaken. This was the price of using the 8 Saints' limitless change. 10 breaths of time was the time it would take for Chu Mu to kill the Gold Sinner King. If he couldn't do it, they would all die. "Leave it to me," Chu Mu said, full of confidence. Although he could not perfectly grasp the power of the 4th refinement, under the heart and sword as one, he could do better. This was something that the 7 kings could not compare to. When he drew his sword, the sword light was like a furious dragon roaring. Its power was terrifying. The 7 kings quickly retreated, giving Chu Mu the field to show his strength. Under the powerful force, the sword light was extremely shocking. It directly hit the Gold Sinner King. These 2 swords were used by Chu Mu to familiarize himself with the increase in power. The accuracy was not high enough, and the Gold Sinner King blocked them. However, the powerful force directly repelled the Gold Sinner King. This was because Chu Mu's current power had surpassed that of the Gold Sinner King. However, the Gold Sinner King was not an ordinary opponent. Although its power was only at the peak of the 3rd refinement, which was not as strong as Chu Mu's 4th refinement, it had an extremely strong defense and self-healing ability. The 2 swords alone were enough to repel it, but they were not enough to cause any obvious damage. After the 2 swords, Chu Mu's two swords did not stop at all. They attacked at the fastest speed. One breath was enough for him to stab thousands of swords. The two swords added together amounted to more than 10,000 swords. Each sword was used by Chu Mu to familiarize himself with the increase in power. The leap from the first refinement to the fourth refinement was extremely shocking. If it were someone else, even if they could withstand it, they would not be able to use their own power. Only someone like Chu Mu, who had perfect control of his own body and had comprehended the essence of the heart and sword as one, could do it. 2 breaths, 3 breaths, in a short 3 breaths of time, Chu Mu's two swords simultaneously struck out, surpassing 40,000 strike. With each strike, he was adjusting. With each strike, he was silently calculating. This kind of concentration caused his mind to be constantly exhausted, but in exchange, it was an extremely gratifying harvest. Chu Mu was rapidly familiarizing himself with and grasping the explosive power in his body. By the 5th breath, Chu Mu had basically mastered his own power. There were less than 10 breaths left. Under the continuous attacks of tens of thousands of swords, the Gold Sinner King could not find a chance to counterattack. It could only endure Chu Mu's two swords. Under the attacks of the two swords, it was injured again and was forced to retreat. In the short span of 5 breaths, wounds appeared on the Gold Sinner King's body. They were densely packed and quickly disappeared and reappeared again. It was a hair-raising sight. After being continuously suppressed and stabbed by tens of thousands of swords, the Gold Sinner King was infuriated even though it did not suffer much damage. Its anger burned so much that it almost materialized and seeped out of its body. Illusory golden flames burned and steamed on the Gold Sinner King's body, as if it wanted to turn everything around it into ashes. Its eyes contained a shocking flame, a golden flame. It opened its mouth, which was pitch black like a black hole. It exuded a heart-palpitating aura. The airflow surged and rolled out from the depths of the black hole. A terrifying roar with endless sound waves that seemed to shatter the sky resounded in all directions. The 7 kings' faces changed drastically. The feeling of the demonic sound filling their heads made their scalps tingle and their heads swell. In an instant, their minds stopped working as if they could not think. Even Chu Mu, who was extremely powerful at the moment, was affected. However, Chu Mu tried his best to neutralize the impact. He slashed with his two swords and cut the incoming demon-like roar into pieces. Sound was an invisible force. The true meaning in the swords was also an invisible force. "Your end is here," Chu Mu said in a low voice. There was an unimaginable determination in his tone. All of his power was injected into the two swords. Chu Mu's eyes flickered as they locked on to the Gold Sinner King's heart. That was the Gold Sinner King's weakness. The heart and sword were as one. It was unstoppable. Chu Mu's two swords were like meteors that pierced through the void. They crossed time and space at an indescribable speed and appeared in front of the Gold Sinner King's heart. The Gold Sinner King was unable to resist. It directly broke through the tough golden membrane, tore through the elastic muscles, and pierced the heart. In an instant, the Gold Sinner King was unable to resist. Chu Mu's two swords poured into its heart. It felt an incomparably powerful force. That force instantly resisted Chu Mu's swords and counterattacked. The sinner's heart was the source of their power. It was also the hardest part of their body. If meteors did not work, then Cloud Piercer would do. The two swords stabbed forward and backward. 2 cloud piercings, one after the other, pierced into the Gold Sinner King's chest that had not yet healed. It went straight for the heart. With a beat of the heart, an incomparably tyrannical power burst forth. It was like a storm tide, like a volcanic eruption. It blocked Chu Mu's two swords and wanted to repel Chu Mu's two swords. Sheathing his swords, he attacked again. Cloud Piercer. Breath after breath, Chu Mu did his best to erupt. He stabbed again and again. The 7 sinners all watched with wide eyes. They were full of anticipation, excitement, and nervousness. Chu Mu's sword was where their hope lay. Time passed breath by breath. However, Chu Mu's sword was still unable to break through Gold Sinner King's heart even after using all his strength. The power contained within was too powerful. The heart itself was unable to be tough. With the two working together, it was able to stop Chu Mu. Perhaps if Chu Mu had more time, he could have broken through. However, he only had a dozen breaths of time. Not only would the 7 sinners' power weaken, but Chu Mu's support of the 8 saints' everlasting matrix would also stop. Not enough. My power is still not enough. I need more power, Chu Mu said to himself. 10 breaths of time had passed. There were only about 4 breaths of time left. Without hesitation, he equipped himself with silver divine armor. However, it did not bring any enhancement. Chu Mu's current strength was far beyond the saint realm. Only gold-level divine armor could enhance his strength. There was no doubt that Chu Mu had lost one of his trump cards. He tried to activate the demon-fighting Vambrace, but it could no longer enhance his strength and speed. He had lost another trump card. In the end, Chu Mu activated the Sword Domain Change. In the past, the Sword Domain Change was enough to enhance the power of his sword techniques by several times. However, at this time, his power was not his own. It was forced by the battle matrix. The Sword Domain Change could only enhance part of his own power. This was only a slight increase on the foundation of the 4th refinement. Such power was still not enough to kill the Gold Sinner King. The 7 sinners clenched their fists so hard that their fingers turned white. There were only 2 breaths of time left. There was no more time. Then, let me try the power of the new sword intent, Chu Mu said to himself. He made up his mind to use it. With a turn of his mind, Chu Mu mobilized the strand of sword intent that he could barely use in his spiritual world. The black sword chi exuded an extremely destructive aura. When it appeared on the blazing glory spirit sword, it immediately suppressed all power. Its dominance and destruction made the 7 sinners tremble involuntarily. Their minds were instantly lifted. Chapter 1873. It was like a hot knife cutting through butter. No one could stop it. This was the ultimate move. Chu Mu had used all his strength in this move. Cloud-piercing sword. A trace of imperceptible pitch-black aura finally gathered at the tip of the blazing glory spiritual sword. It suppressed all the power and then gathered together to form a single entity. This was a power that made the 7 kings tremble in fear. The Gold Sinner King also felt a great sense of danger. However, it could not dodge because Chu Mu's sword could not be avoided. The tip of the sword once again pierced into the Gold Sinner King's incomparably hard heart of gold. Under the control of the Gold Sinner King, the tyrannical power burst out in an instant. The terrible impact destroyed everything in its path, and almost destroyed the blazing glory spiritual sword. The dark aura swayed, but it quickly melted the power of the impact and turned it into nothingness. The incomparably tough Gold Sinner's heart was silently torn open by that wisp of pitch-black aura. Subsequently, the pitch-black aura was completely exhausted. However, the heart had already been pierced. Even though it was only a small wound, it was enough. Great strength technique. Explosive strength technique. The 2 techniques were used in an instant. Chu Mu's right arm swelled. The power gathered and exploded. He pushed the sword in his hand and stabbed it forward. It was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. With an obscure sound, the blazing glory spiritual sword pierced deeply into the Gold Sinner King's heart of gold. All the power in his body exploded. He did not hold back at all. Chu Mu put away the eternal spiritual sword and held the hilt of the blazing glory spiritual sword in his left hand. He kept pushing forward. The Gold Sinner King kept retreating. Chu Mu kept moving forward. The tip of the blazing glory spiritual sword pierced deep into the heart and came out from the other side. It pierced through the entire heart. The heart was the source of the sinner's power, the source of their life. Their hearts were incomparably hard, especially the hearts of the Gold Sinners. Even the 7 kings, who could kill gold sinners at the level of first refinement, would find it difficult to destroy their gold hearts. The gold sinner king was a powerful existence at the peak of the 3rd refinement. Its heart was far harder than a first refinement gold sinner. Even if Chu Mu's strength was raised to the 4th refinement, he could not damage it at all, let alone break it. For this reason, Chu Mu had no choice but to use the new sword intent, even though it was very risky. However, the risk was insignificant compared to the lives of himself, the 7 kings, and the countless people in the land of exile. Fortunately, he won the gamble. The difficulty of digging out the heart of the Golden Sinner King was no easier than destroying it. In the case that Chu Mu used his sword will, it was more cost-effective to destroy the heart because time did not allow for it. The powerful strength in his body began to fade. Chu Mu quickly stabilized the sword intent in his spiritual world to prevent it from fluctuating too much. The Gold Sinner King kept retreating. The blazing glory spirit sword pierced through its heart and destroyed it. The powerful strength in its body poured out like a flood that had been opened. The Gold Sinner King's aura rapidly declined. Peak of the 3rd refinement. Late of the 3rd refinement. Middle of the 3rd refinement. Early of the 3rd refinement. Peak of the 2nd refinement. In the blink of an eye, the Gold Sinner King fell from the peak of the 3rd refinement to the 1st refinement. Although the speed of its decline was reduced, it still showed no signs of stopping. With a roar, the Gold Sinner King pounced on Chu Mu. The 7 kings attacked. 7 sword light repelled the Gold Sinner King and sent it flying. Chu Mu quickly retreated and put some distance between them. While panting, he quickly adjusted his breathing and recovered his strength. He summoned the Eternal Spirit sword again and held it in his hand as he stared at the Gold Sinner King. Besieged by the 7 kings, the Gold Sinner King's strength continued to weaken. The defense of the gold membrane also plummeted. Under the 7 sword light of different colors, the Gold Sinner King's body stopped moving. Immediately after, it shattered into pieces and fell to the ground. It's finally dead. The crisis is over. The 7 kings breathed a sigh of relief and were overjoyed. Thank goodness we have young friend Chu. Everyone was excited and looked at Chu Mu. I'm no match for this Gold Sinner King. Chu Mu smiled and said, It's all thanks to the seniors. None of you can be missing, said Mysterious King. His eyes lit up as he stared at Chu Mu. Little friend Chu, I noticed that you didn't use any sword intent at the start of the fight. However, in the last strike, you used a sliver of sword intent. Even though it was only a sliver, it made my heart palpitate. What sword intent was that? Due to some reasons, I can't use sword intent for the time being. Chu Mu explained simply, but this time, I can't use sword intent. This sword intent is a new sword intent that I've condensed. Its power is filled with destruction. It's even more extreme than the destruction sword intent. However, it doesn't have a name yet. A new sword intent. The 7 kings sighed. An extreme power of destruction. Extreme destruction. This sword intent is indeed terrifying. White Silver King pulled the Blazing Glory spiritual sword out of the Gold Sinner King's heart. He glanced at the Blazing Glory spiritual sword and then at the heart of gold that had been pierced through. His eyes flashed with fear. There were 2 wounds on the heart of gold. The wounds on the front and back of the heart were different. The wound on the back was a sword wound and was very obvious. However, the wound on the front was a little strange. It was very smooth, as if it had been directly melted by some power and not pierced through by a sword. It had disappeared and completely turned into nothingness, annihilation. Why don't we call this annihilation sword intent? White Silver King said unconsciously. He immediately reacted and handed the Blazing Glory spiritual sword to Chu Mu. The spirituality of this spiritual sword has been destroyed by your new sword intent. This sword intent is too domineering. Annihilation sword intent is very appropriate. Thank you, Senior. Chu-Mu smiled and agreed to the name of the new sword intent. He took the Blazing Glory spiritual sword and looked at it. He felt it was a pity. Cracks had appeared on the sword's body, as if it had been shattered. Although he had only used a trace of Annihilation's sword intent, the terrifying power of Annihilation had caused obvious damage to the spirituality of the Blazing Glory spiritual sword. In addition to the backlash from piercing the Gold Sinner King's heart, the Blazing Glory spiritual sword's body was further damaged. In short, the Blazing Glory spiritual sword was useless. Fortunately, there was still the eternal spiritual sword that could be used. It seems like I have to nurture a spiritual sword that is suitable for Annihilation's sword intent, Chu-Mu thought. In his Dantian, the sword embryo of the innate spiritual sword was constantly being tempered. Long ago, the sword embryo could have been forged into a spiritual sword. However, Chu-Mu had always limited it to the final stage of forming because he planned to infuse a power into the sword embryo. As for what kind of power it was, he wasn't sure. Now he knew. By infusing Annihilation's sword intent into it, it will become an Annihilation spiritual sword. Not only can it bear Annihilation's sword intent without any damage, it can also increase the strength of Annihilation's sword intent to a certain extent. Chu-Mu thought, however, Annihilation's sword intent has yet to fully form. I still have to wait. After so many years, a portion of the ordinary sword intent had already turned into Annihilation's sword intent. However, the Annihilation power had also been greatly depleted. This was also the reason why Chu-Mu dared to risk using a trace of Annihilation's sword intent. If he used it before, the sword intent would definitely collapse and all his previous efforts would be wasted. However, if he used it now, he would have to bear some risk. There was still a chance of success. Even so, Chu-Mu didn't dare to use it casually. He only dared to take a risk in a life-and-death situation like this. Let's go. Since the crisis has been resolved, there's no need to stay any longer. Blood Slaughterer King said. Everyone moved and quickly left the cave. As they left, they recovered their strength. Little friend Shu, you have now surpassed the level of Sword Star and reached the level of King. Since ancient times, there have only been 7 kings in the land of exile. It's not that we don't want other kings to appear, but that no new kings have appeared. Now, little friend Chu, although you are still in the saint level, your strength has already reached the level of king. The 8th king. Yes, little friend Chu. When we return, we will spread the news that you have become the 8th king. This is the honor you deserve. Little friend Chu, you were previously called Unparalleled Sword Star. As the 8th king, why don't you just call yourself Unparalleled King? 7 seniors, I have no objection to being the 8th king. However, the title of King Unparalleled is too great, Chu-Mu said. Little friend Chu, you are worthy of this title, Blood Slaughterer King said. Saint level, king level strength. One day, when you truly step into the king level, your strength will surpass us. Even the 6 stars after receiving the inheritance will not be able to compare with you. You are worthy of the title of Unparalleled, Mysterious King said. Then it's decided, King Unparalleled. Silver King smiled. Greetings, King Unparalleled. Please guide me in the future, Green Evil King said jokingly. Seniors, you are too kind, Chu-Mu said. Ha ha ha, the 7 kings laughed. Although the 8th king had not truly reached the level of king level, his strength had reached the level of king level. In fact, for many people, having the strength of a king level was already a king level. No one had ever reached that level. Now that there was one, the 8th king, it was significant. King Unparalleled, when you return, why don't you cultivate in the essence blood pool and raise your saint body to the peak of the 9th level? Blood Slaughterer King suggested. I have been hesitating whether to be thick-skinned and mention it. Since Blood Slaughterer King has asked, I will accept, Chu-Mu said, smiling. King Unparalleled, if there is anything else you need, just say it, Flowing Light King said, smiling. King Unparalleled, I see that you are good at using 2 swords. Now that you are missing one, I have some spiritual swords that are not bad. Why don't you come to my place and pick one or two? Silver King said. After deciding on the title of the 8th king, they treated Chu Mu as an equal. Naturally, they would not talk to him as they did before. When they joked, they would treat him like a friend. This was the respect brought by strength. Chapter 1874. Other than the 7 kings and Chu Mu, no one else knew that they had survived a huge crisis. After the 7 kings returned, they did not go back on their words. The news quickly spread, once again causing a commotion in the 5 cities and dozens of camps. The 8th king. Since ancient times, there had only been 7 kings in the land of exile. Generation after generation, there had been many outstanding people who had worked hard to become the 8th king, but no one had succeeded. Now there was news of the 8th king. Moreover, it came from the mouth of the 7 kings, including the lords of the 5 cities, the general of the flowing light army, and King Xuanmiao. It was not a rumor. With the status of the 7 kings, they would not spread rumors at all. In other words, the 8th king really existed and had appeared. The second piece of news. King Peerless Chu Mu. In fact, the 2 pieces of news could be considered one, because the so-called 8th king was King Peerless Chu Mu. Peerless Sword Star. King Peerless. I knew that he would definitely become a king one day, but I did not expect it to be so fast. The 8th king, the ultimate glory. The most important thing is not the 8th king, but King Peerless, the King Peerless recognized by the 7 kings. The word peerless had a very deep meaning. It represented the pinnacle, the meaning that no one could reach. The 6 great stars were all monsters and proud people. However, in the end, they all acknowledged Chu Mu's title of Peerless Sword Star from the bottom of their hearts. And now, the 7 kings had unanimously acknowledged the title of Peerless King. This meant that Chu Mu could very well become the head of the 8 kings, and be the champion of the land of exile. Above millions of people, the ultimate glory. In the blink of an eye, another 5 years had passed since Chu Mu and the 7 kings worked together to kill the Gold Sinner King and resolve the crisis in the land of exile. The 30-year deadline was getting closer and closer. There were less than 3 years left. Chu Mu's body was filled with extremely powerful blood qi. It was like a 10,000-year-old volcano that did not erupt, but once it did, the power would shake the world and destroy everything. After cultivating in the essence blood pool, Chu Mu's saintly body had advanced to the middle stage of level 9. The remaining time was not enough for him to break through to the late stage of level 9. As for his Yuan Qi cultivation, it was no surprise that he had reached the peak of the Aeon 9th heavenly layer. However, this peak wasn't the limit. He still needed to purify and refine his Yuan Qi. This was a step that every cultivator had to go through. Therefore, a peak 9-star saint who had just broken through and a peak 9-star saint who had been accumulating Yuan Qi for dozens of years might not have the same amount of Yuan Qi. However, there was a clear difference in the purity of their Yuan Qi. Refining and purifying elemental energy would be a relatively long process. In fact, the way of the divine body was the same. After reaching the peak of level 9, it also needed to undergo tempering. It was the same for the way of the primordial spirit. There are still more than 2 years left. Let's continue to settle. Chu Mu raised his head and looked at the sky. Today was a rare day of good weather. The sky was a rare shade of azure blue and white clouds floated in the sky. Chu Mu planned to properly refine the divine wilderness sword origin for more than 2 years. Now that his Yuan Qi cultivation had reached the peak of the sacred grade, the Dragon Yuan pill could only replenish his Yuan Qi. Way of the divine body. Middle stage of level 9. It's still too far away. Chu Mu thought to himself. In terms of strength, the current him had increased a lot from the foundation of a first refinement exceptional expert. This was brought about by his Yuan Qi cultivation, rising from the late stage of the Aeon 9th heavenly layer to the peak. It was also brought about by the divine body's cultivation, rising from the early stage of level 9 to the middle stage of level 9. However, it was still at the first refinement level. First refinement? It's still not enough. Chumu thought to himself. To return to the deep blue world and fight against many forces, such as the Imperial Court and the Sky Tribe, the strength of a first refinement exceptional expert wasn't enough. He needed to be even stronger. But now, there wasn't enough time. It wasn't that easy to increase his strength again. Also, because of the increase in strength, some of his trump cards had lost their usefulness. For example, the Silver Divine Equipment and the Demon Vanquishing Vambrace. The stronger one was, the fewer treasures that could increase one's strength. In other words, the rarer the treasures were. If he wanted to become stronger, he had to start from himself. That was the truth. Chumu couldn't be anxious. He grasped the air with his right hand. A wisp of silver-white aura filled with astonishing sharpness spread out and turned into a silver-white sword. The thin sword body was silver-white. It was like a mirror that reflected everything. Chumu's wrist trembled slightly. The sword in his hand immediately turned into an incomparably sharp silver light. It ignored all changes in resistance. The sword light was ice-cold, as if it could cut through everything. Spiritual Sword Silver Light. This spiritual sword was chosen by Chumu from the Silver King's collection. It was a middle-rank spiritual sword that focused on sharpness. The blazing brilliance spiritual sword's body and spirituality were damaged. It was equivalent to being crippled. The second spiritual sword was also set aside because the new sword intent hadn't been completely formed. In order to better unleash his strength, Chumu could only grasp a new spiritual sword and use it with the eternal spiritual sword to better perform the dual sword technique. The grade of the Silver Light spiritual sword was about the same as the Blazing Brilliance spiritual sword. However, the difference between the two was that the Blazing Brilliance spiritual sword contained the power of flames and its attack power was more violent. On the other hand, the Silver Light spiritual sword's power was very sharp and its cutting power was astonishing. Both of them had their strength. With the spiritual sword Silver Light in his hand, Chumu immediately began to cultivate his sword technique. Young Master, the Villa Master of the Hegemon Sword Villa is here to visit. A figure came to the backyard. It was the little maid, Lin Biruo. Compared to 5 years ago, Lin Biruo's cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. This was the result of her own hard work, and the biggest reason was Chumu's nurturing. From the moment she firmly became Chumu's maid, it was destined that she would be extraordinary in the future. At least, she wouldn't be the same as before. She wouldn't develop in the same way as before. With Chumu's current status, there were too many people who wanted to curry favor with him. If Chumu wanted to get some elixirs, it was a very simple matter. These elixirs were almost useless to him. It was just right for Lin Biruo to consume and refine them. With Chumu around, Lin Biruo would be in no danger while refining the elixirs. The current Lin Biruo exuded an aura that made people know that she was no longer the little maid of the early 7th sky of Wangu 5 years ago. She was a young genius expert whose cultivation had reached the peak of the 8th sky of Wangu. "What's the matter?" asked Chumu as he practiced his sword. Ever since the title of King Peerless spread out, there would always be people who came to visit him. It could be said that everyone came to curry favor with him. He was a new king and a very young one at that. They believed that his future was limitless. He was even better than the 7 kings. However, Chumu didn't meet most of them. Instead, he let Lin Biruo, the Waning Moon Sword Saint, and the Rock Sword Saint receive them. After all, kings had their statuses. They couldn't be met just because they wanted to. It wasn't that Chumu was putting on airs, but that he didn't want to waste time. He said that he just obtained a kind of essence of heaven and earth, said Lin Biruo. As an excellent maid, she knew what Chumu wanted. Of course, Chumu had also revealed this idea before. At one point, many people had started to search for essence of heaven and earth. However, there was too little essence of heaven and earth in the land of exile. Until now, no one had been able to take it out. "Let him in," said Chumu. His expression changed. He stopped practicing and ordered, "Yes, young master." Lin Biruo quickly retreated. Soon, Lin Biruo came in again. There were two people behind her. One was a middle-aged man. He was tall and strong. If he was in front of others, he would definitely have the demeanor of an overlord. However, when he saw Chumu, he was as obedient as a little sheep. The other person was a child of 8 or 9 years old. He had clear eyes and looked very lively. Hegemon Sword Villa's Villa Master Wei Wuji and his son Wei Wudao greet King Peerless. When they saw Chumu, they immediately bowed. "No need to be so polite. You said that you have essence of heaven and earth. What kind is it?" asked Chumu. Essence of heaven and earth was incomparably precious. However, to Chumu, there was a difference between important and unimportant. "Reporting to King Peerless, it's the frost spirit," replied Wei Wuji. He stretched out his palm. A ball of white frost chi was spinning on his palm. It emitted a shocking chill and instantly froze the surrounding air. Chumu's eyes lit up. "What's the exchange?" asked Chumu. "I hope that my son Wei Wudao can enter King Peerless' tutelage to learn the sword," said Wei Wuji. That child had been looking at Chumu with anticipation. Chumu glanced at Wei Wudao. Light flickered in his eyes and he nodded. This child seemed to be quite intelligent. He might be a good seedling. However, he still had to make things clear. "I can accept him as my disciple and teach him the sword. However, the time limit is only 2 years. Chumu said, because 2 years later it would be 30 years. At that time, he would have to leave the land of exile and return to the deep blue world. "Master, please accept 3 kowtows from your disciple." Wei Wudao was very quick-witted. He immediately took 3 steps forward and quickly knelt down in front of Chumu. He kowtowed 3 times in an instant. Each kowtow was loud and full of sincerity. "King Peerless, please take care of my son," said Wei Wuji emotionally. He respectfully handed over the frost spirit with both hands. Chumu didn't hold back and immediately grabbed the frost spirit and put it away. Promptly, he looked at Wei Wudao and said, "Get up. Counting things, you are your master's second disciple. However, perhaps you will never have the chance to meet your eldest senior brother." His tone was somewhat emotional as he thought of the ancient sword continent. Very soon, the news of Wei Wudao becoming Chumu's disciple spread. Chumu also planned to hold a ceremony and invited the 7 kings to participate. Many people were envious of Wei Wudao. They also knew how Wei Wudao became King Peerless' disciple. Therefore, they were even more enthusiastic about the search for the essence of heaven and earth. Time flew. Very soon, 2 years had passed. The 30-year time limit was up. Chumu also left Bloodbath City after giving some instructions. He was leaving the land of exile and leaving behind a legend. Chapter 1875. Beyond the border of the land of exile, there was a thick gray area. This was the famous Gray Mist Realm. "Seniors, let's stop here." Chumu turned around to face the void and spoke neither quickly nor slowly. "King Wu Shuang, are you really leaving?" Figures appeared one after another. They were the 7 kings. 29 years ago I was chased by many experts. Among them, there was no lack of peerless experts. I had no choice but to enter the land of exile to seek opportunities to increase my strength. Now that I have the strength of a peerless expert, it's time for me to return and settle my grudges," Chumu said calmly. Other than settling his grudges, there were other things he wanted to do. He wanted to collect the 18 deep blue god pearls and find the location of the world spirit to gain its recognition. In the past, he wanted to do it but was powerless, but now, he had the strength to do so. In the era where the sacred emperor lived in seclusion, only peerless experts were the peak of strength. What a pity! The 8th king has just appeared here and now he has to leave. The 7 kings felt pity, but they didn't force Chu Mu to stay. That was because there was no meaning in doing so. It would only attract Chu Mu's hostility. Actually, if it's possible, I want to go to the deep blue world to take a look. Unfortunately, I can't leave. This was also a pity. King Wu Shuang, if you find it difficult to establish yourself in the deep blue world in the future, you can come here again. Blood Slaughter King said. If there's a chance, I will come and spar with all of you again. Chu Mu smiled and said. This time, he could only succeed in returning to the deep blue world. If he failed, he would have to pay with his life. The 7 kings nodded and didn't say anything else. They turned and left one by one. In the end, only Chu Mu was left. He stood outside the gray mist realm and waited. He was waiting for Gu Luankong, Yang Zhantian and Lien Hongyun to fulfill their promise. While waiting, Chu Mu naturally wouldn't waste time. Instead, he seized every second to comprehend the sword universe and the sword technique. Less than 30 years in the land of exile. For many cultivators, it might only be the time for a few or even a single seclusion. However, for Chu Mu it was a very rich experience. And these experiences were all his experiences. They were the accumulation of his life, the accumulation of his foundation. Very few people would come to the realm of gray mist. Here, Chu Mu would not be disturbed. This time, only a few people knew about his departure. The 7 kings, Waning Moon Sword Saint, Rock Sword Saint, Lin Biruo and the disciple he had accepted 2 years ago, Wei Wudao. After being convinced, Waning Moon and Rock Sword Saint were very loyal to Chu Mu. Therefore, Chu Mu also gave them opportunities. Their cultivation had already reached the middle stage of the immemorial 9th heavenly layer. With the resources that Chu Mu left for them, they might be able to reach the peak of the immemorial 9th heavenly layer. Moreover, Chu Mu taught them a sword technique that suited their characteristics. They could unleash the power of the sword technique to the extreme. With suitable sword techniques, Waning Moon and Rock Sword Saint could challenge ordinary high-level 9-star saint. To them, who were stuck at the peak of the 8-star saint realm for their entire lives, this was a great gift. The peak of the 9-star saint realm was the pinnacle of many cultivators' lives. Lin Biruo's cultivation had reached the early stage of the immemorial 9th heavenly layer. Moreover, she had completely mastered the 8 ripples technique. Chu Mu also taught her an even more profound sword technique that was similar to her own. It was very compatible. The level of this sword technique was almost at the peak of the inherited level. It was not inferior to the silver sword technique. After Chu Mu left, Lin Biruo would return to the Lin family. With her in charge, the Lin family would slowly develop and become one of the most powerful forces in Bloodbath City. After all, Chu Mu had said that he hoped that the Bloodbath Hall would treat Lin Biruo well and even help her a little. They had to give face to King Peerless. Finally, there was the second disciple, Wei Wudao. He was only 9 years old, but he was a rare genius. His cultivation was close to the Nirvana realm. As for Chu Mu's teachings, he did not want him to break through to the Nirvana realm so quickly. It would be best if he could break through to the Nirvana realm after he reached adulthood. The Nirvana realm was the nirvana of one's flesh and blood, the nirvana of one's energy center, and even the nirvana of one's soul. Therefore, the Nirvana realm required one's body to be complete after reaching adulthood. Chu Mu did not raise his cultivation. Instead, he taught Wei Wudao the divine wilderness sword technique and so on. He also taught him sword techniques and so on, allowing him to cultivate and comprehend them. Since he was a disciple, he would treat him with all his heart. In these 2 years, Chu Mu could be considered to have taught Wei Wudao wholeheartedly. After all, they may not have the chance to meet again. In these 2 years, he had laid down an excellent foundation for Wei Wudao. As for what would happen in the future, it would depend on Wei Wudao's own ability and luck. The aura in the land of exile is getting thicker. If this goes on, it will condense into a seal. When that happens, it will be difficult to leave the land of exile. Chu Mu said to himself after he checked himself. Now, it had been some time since they arrived at the land of grey fog. There were only a few days left before the 30 years were up. However, Gu Luankong, Yang Zhantian and Lien Hongyun still had not appeared. Could it be that they are already dead? Chu Mu could not help but think. In fact, before he left Bloodbath City, he had asked the 5 castellans for help to find the whereabouts of Gu Luankong and the other 2. After all, the time was up. However, the search was fruitless and he did not know where they had gone. If they are not dead, they must have gone to other places, Chu Mu said to himself. Other than the 5 castellans, there was Sin City further away. Were there other castellans in other directions? If there were, perhaps Gu Luankong and the other 2 had gone there. Could it be that the 3 of them have forgotten about the time? As he guessed, Gu Luankong and the other 2 still did not appear on the last day. If that's the case, I will go back first, Chu Mu said to himself. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the air. He grabbed a piece of land and condensed it into a sturdy stone tablet. He stood on the ground. Using his finger as a sword, he carved a few words on the stone tablet. The words entered the tablet and were extremely sharp. I will go back first. There were only 4 words and no signature. Those who did not know would find it strange and would not know what it meant. Go back? Go back where? However, Chu Mu believed that if Gu Luankong, Yang Zhantian and Lien Hongyun saw it, they would be able to feel the aura he had left on the tablet and know what he meant. After setting up the stone tablet, Chu Mu turned around and walked into the realm of grey fog without looking back. His body seemed to have been devoured and disappeared. Only the stone tablet was left standing. The stone tablet was created by Chu Mu and was incomparably hard. Even a Dark Star Sword Saint's full power attack wouldn't be able to damage it in the slightest. Adding on the remnants of Chu Mu's sword aura, even a Bright Sun rank expert wouldn't be able to damage this stone tablet for at least a few hundred years. In the entire land of exile, there were only a few Bright Sun Sword Saints. Basically, they would not come here. However, Chu Mu did not know that not long after, someone came here by chance and saw the stone tablet. He was shocked by the 4 words left on it. After comprehending it, his sword skills improved and he saw it as a treasure. When more and more people knew about the effects of the stone tablet, they all came here to comprehend it. It became a sacred place for comprehending sword skills. It was only a few hundred years later that the effects of the stone tablet weakened. The realm of grey fog was a vast expanse of grey. The power of the soul was affected and lost its effect. If one's heart was not firm enough, it was very likely that they would get lost in it. However, Chu Mu could pass through it back then. There was no reason why he could not pass through it now. With a flash of light, Chu Mu entered the heart and sword as one state. Everything within a 20-meter radius became clear, as if the grey fog had all disappeared, turning into a bright and clear world. Heart and sword as one was the power of the heart. It was different from the power of the soul. The grey fog in the realm of grey fog could cause the power of the soul to lose its effect, but it could not affect the power of the heart. After what seemed like a long time, a clear, azure sky appeared in front of him. It was like a huge gemstone. White clouds drifted in the sky like the patterns on the gemstone. It was magnificent. Every breath of fresh air made Chu Mu feel comfortable. This had nothing to do with the strength of the heaven and earth Yuan Qi. It was purely the freshness of the air. It was completely different from the land of exile. There was no smell of gunpowder. It was as if he had come from the battlefield of war to a world of clear water and blue sky. The change in environment brought about a different feeling to his senses and body. After nearly 30 years, Chu Mu had gotten used to the environment of the land of exile. Returning to the deep blue world was a novel experience for Chu Mu. It was just like 30 years ago when he entered the land of exile from the deep blue world. I'm back! A long roar, like the clear cry of a divine sword, soared into the sky. A white cloud drifting in the sky instantly turned into powder and disappeared without a trace. Chu-Mu looked into the distance. The mountains were insignificant and became deep and distant, as if they had penetrated through time and space. It has been 30 years. You shouldn't have forgotten about me. Now, it's time to settle the score. 30 years ago, he was hunted down by many experts and had nowhere to go. He could only enter the land of exile. Firstly, it was to seek refuge. Secondly, it was to seek a powerful opportunity. Now, he had done it. Therefore, he had returned. Almost at the same time, he let out that long roar. The people in the deep blue world, who were related to Chu-Mu, felt their hearts skip a beat. They didn't know why, but they felt an indescribable feeling. This feeling seemed to be telling them that something was about to happen. Moreover, it was concerned about them. The stronger the person, the more obvious this feeling was. However, no matter how much they thought about it, they couldn't find anything. 30 years wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. A person who had left for 30 years would be slowly forgotten and placed in the corner of one's memory. If one didn't see him again, it wouldn't be so easy to remember him. However, that wasn't important. What was important was that Chu-Mu had returned with great strength. Chapter 1876. Why do I have a feeling of unease? Located at the peak of a mountain, there were vast and majestic palaces. Among them, in the largest and most majestic palace at the center, a tall and robust middle-aged man sat on the throne. His appearance was ordinary, but he had a domineering aura, as if he was the only one in the world. His entire body emitted traces of shocking battle intent, as if he wanted to fight with the heavens. At this moment, the man unconsciously frowned. His calm mind was like a stone thrown into the water, creating layers of ripples. A feeling of unease quietly emerged like tender grass breaking out of the ground. He thought, but had no clue. Men! The middle-aged man shouted. A figure flashed and appeared in the main hall. He knelt down on one knee and supported himself with one hand. Lord War King, what orders do you have? Invite Lord Jishur over. The man called War King said. His tone always had a sense of superiority. Yes. The figure flashed again and the kneeling man disappeared. War King's gaze became deep as he looked outside the main hall. The huge city floating thousands of meters in the air was surrounded by countless white clouds. As it slowly floated, it was like a fairyland. Suddenly, the blue sky silently changed. A touch of red quietly spread out and gradually expanded. It was as if the sky had been cut by a sword and was bleeding, the wound expanding. What's going on? Why is there such a phenomenon in the sky? In Cloud Heaven City, the sky race people discovered this phenomenon and were immediately shocked. A red color appeared in the blue sky. It was as red as blood and looked shocking. This kind of phenomenon directly gave the sky race people an ominous feeling. The people of the heavenly race called themselves the descendants of the heavenly gods and placed themselves at the highest point of their respective races. The way they did things was to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens, and the sky was one of their symbols. But now, a strange blood-red color had appeared in the sky, and it had not appeared anywhere else, but had appeared right above Cloud Heaven City. This was something that they could not help but pay great attention to. More and more people from the Tian clan noticed the strange phenomenon in the sky, and the blood-red color quickly spread out, as if it had been soaked in blood. Even the white clouds floating around Cloud Heaven City were affected, and were gradually dyed a blood-red color. The originally pure white clouds slowly turned red. It looked a little strange and attracted the attention of the upper echelons of the sky race. Inside the God Pagoda, the upper echelons of the Tian clan gathered. Have you found anything? What's going on? We still haven't found out what's going on. The blue sky is turning red and blood is spreading. This is an ominous sign. A celestial race doyen said in a serious tone. He kept staring at the expanding blood-red color in the sky. Where's Tianjizi? Let him calculate and see what the reason is. Tianjizi was a name in the Tian clan. It was also a title that was passed down from generation to generation. In the Tian clan, there was only one Tian Jizi in each generation. However, there was more than one Tian clan member who wanted to become Tian Jizi. Only the most outstanding one could obtain this title. The Heaven's legacy lineage cultivated the Tao of divination. It was rumored that Tian Jizi of the Tian clan had an incomparably profound and accurate way of deduction. He could even deduce some information about the past and the future. Soon, a handsome young man arrived at the divine pagoda. His body was surrounded by an indescribable aura. It was obscure and mysterious. He had the aura of someone who could control everything under the heavens without leaving his home. Tian Jizi greets the doyen. Tian Jizi bowed slightly. As a very outstanding and important divine predictor, to a certain extent, his status was not inferior to the patriarchs in the clan. However, in terms of age, there was a large gap between him and the patriarch. Therefore, a certain amount of respect was necessary. Tian Jizi, this is an ominous sign. Why don't you make a divination first? One of the eminent elders said slowly. Doyen, before I came, I had already calculated it. Tian Jizi said slowly. His voice was gentle, but his brows were slightly furrowed. The result of the calculation is very vague. I can only be sure that something unfavorable to my Tian clan will happen in the future. If you activate the Great Divine Array, will the calculation be clearer? The doyen asked. Perhaps. Tian Jizi pondered for a moment and replied in an uncertain tone. Then activate the Great Divine Array and calculate with all your strength. The Great Divine Array belonged to the Divine Array. It only had one function, and that was to strengthen Tian Jizi's calculation. However, the Great Divine Array was usually not activated because every time it was activated, it would consume a lot of resources. For the Tian clan, it was not easy to bear. Unless it was a critical moment, the Great Divine Array would not be activated. Tian Jizi of this generation remembered very clearly that ever since he became Tian Jizi, the Great Divine Array had never been activated even once. The Great Divine Array was of great importance. Therefore, in addition to Tian Jizi's agreement, it also needed the support of more than 60% of the doyen. Now, this condition was met. The Great Divine Array was located at the highest level of the Divine Mystery Tower. When it was activated, the vitality of the heavens and the earth was rapidly absorbed. The entire Divine Mystery Tower seemed to have come alive. In an instant, it radiated a unique wave that swept out and filled the entire Cloud Heaven City. The power within the Divine Tower was rapidly consumed. Under the condensation of the aura, a beam of light shot into the sky like a divine sword, piercing through the void and piercing through the 9 heavens. The light exploded at the top and scattered down, forming a transparent light shield, like a huge bowl that was upside down. Rivers, lakes, lands, mountains, streams, grasslands, forests, everything appeared as if the world had descended. As it quietly operated, it seemed as if the long river of history was flowing past. Tian Jizi stood at the top of the Divine Tower. The aura of his entire person was fluctuating and was in harmony with the Divine Tower. In his opened eyes, everything outside was reflected. It was as if there were worlds transforming and collapsing in his eyes. Tian Jizi stretched out his 10 fingers. His white, jade-like fingers were enough to make many people scream. His 10 fingers moved rapidly, as if he was playing a musical instrument in the void. It was also like a white lotus blooming. An unpredictable energy fluctuation spread out from his body. The changes in the world in his eyes were even more obvious. He was borrowing the power of the Great Divine Array to wholeheartedly carry out his own divination, to deduce the source of the blood-red phenomenon in the sky above Cloud Sky City. Hundreds of meters high in the sky, a figure flew by neither fast nor slow. It was Chu Mu who had just left a city. In the land of exile, it was not suitable to fly in the air because it was extremely dangerous. In the deep blue world, there was no such concern. In most places, one could fly freely in the air. It was a feeling that he had not felt in a long time. Leaving the deep blue world and entering the land of exile was to avoid the pursuit of many strong enemies, and also to increase his own strength. Now the time was up. His strength had reached the level of an exceptional first refinement expert. When he returned to the deep blue world with such strength, he had the qualifications to protect his life against strong enemies. However, it could only be considered as the qualifications to protect his life. It was not enough to fight against strong enemies. Therefore, he had to increase his strength. He had to refine his origin energy that had reached the peak of the ionic 9th level to the limit. He had to raise his saint body that had reached the middle of the 9th level to the peak of the 9th level. Only then could his strength improve and become even stronger. Moreover, there was still the sword will. Once the annihilation sword will was completely formed, he would be able to use it at will. At that time, his strength would increase again. He would not be inferior to an exceptional second refinement expert, or even surpass them. Other than the increase in his cultivation and the formation of the sword will, he also had to work hard on the secret technique. He had to do his best to master the second level of the sword god's descent. Once he used it, it would be 100 times sharper. In order to increase his own strength, he also had to gather information about strong enemies. He had to know the specific strength of strong enemies to be able to deal with them better. The refinement of the elemental energy requires enough time. The increase of the sacred body requires precious resources. The second level of the sword god's descent secret technique requires the essences of 8 types of heaven and earth. I already have metal, wood, fire, wind, ice, and thunder. I'm missing water and earth. Chumu thought to himself as he flew. Not long ago, he found a wind tower. He paid a huge price to obtain all kinds of information. Information about treasures that could increase the speed of refining origin energy, information about treasures that could raise the level of the saint body, information about the location of water and earth essence of heaven and earth, as well as information about his strong enemies. For example, the black-white round palace, the imperial court, the divine race, and so on. Unfortunately, the wind tower was not omnipotent. There was very little information about the imperial court and the heaven race. Moreover, it was not that useful. Fortunately, the information about the black-white round palace was quite detailed. Other than that, there was information about the peerless experts who were his enemies, such as Zheng Li and Yu Ho, etc. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win every battle. Chu Mu's destination this time was a place with water essence. I'll improve myself first, then kill my way into the black-white round palace. Chu Mu thought to himself. He would not forget that the black-white round palace had intercepted him 30 years ago. They had even sent out a peerless expert, leaving him with no way out. They had forced him to use the sword sect's spiritual seal once to summon the peerless expert, Qing Yi, and leave behind an arm of the peerless expert from the black-white round palace. The peerless expert from the black-white round palace, who had been forced to retreat back then, had the strength of a first refinement expert. After 30 years, it seemed that he was still at the first refinement level. Other than that, there was an even stronger peerless expert from the black-white round palace who had reached the second refinement level. If that's the case, Qing Ye's strength is also at the first refinement level. Then, I've always guessed that Senior Bai Ling is a great emperor or a holy emperor. Is that true or false? Chu Mu thought to himself. After all, he did not know that there were 5 refinements for peerless experts. As he hurried along and pondered, suddenly, an invisible force seemed to descend from the sky. Chu Mu's body froze. His extraordinary senses made him feel something. He could not help but look to the side. It was the direction of the celestial spirit region. At the same time, on top of the heavenly mystery tower in Cloud Heaven City, Tianjizi's eyes reflected the blue sky, and a figure under the blue sky gradually became clearer. Finally, the figure's head turned around, as if to meet Tian Jizi's eyes. Chapter 1877. There was a huge lake with a calm surface. The deep blue color of the lake made it look like a huge sapphire embedded in the ground. It looked very magnificent from the sky. This was Luoshui Lake, the largest lake in the Tianshui region. It was as vast as the sea, and islands were scattered all over the place. They looked like embellishments on a sapphire. At the center of Luoshui Lake, there was an island that was several hundred miles in length and width. It was the largest island in the entire Luoshui Lake. This island was called Luoshui Island, and around it, there were 7 or 8 other islands that were several dozen miles in length and width. They were all encircled. On Luoshui Island there were mountains and forests. The scenery was beautiful. In the center there were many groups of palaces. This place was called Luoshui True Palace. Luoshui True Palace was one of the top forces in the Tianshui region. However, it was not at the top level. On the surface, the palace master of Luoshui True Palace was at the 8th heavenly layer of the Aeon. The experts in charge were only at the 9th heavenly layer of the Aeon. In reality, there were peerless experts in the Luoshui True Palace. There was an obvious difference between the forces in the Deep Blue World and the Land of Exile. In the forces in the Deep Blue World, the person in charge wasn't usually the strongest person in the force. Those strongest people were usually in closed-door cultivation in pursuit of a higher level. As long as the force wasn't under great threat, they wouldn't appear. Instead, they would act as a deterrent. There were even some forces that had exceptional experts in charge. Very few people knew about this. If it was not for the fact that the Wind Whispering Tower was spread throughout the Deep Blue World, they would not have known about the Luoshui True Palace. Chu Mu flew in the air. His body and sword were one. He was like a heavenly sword sweeping across the sky. His speed was unimaginable. In an instant, he crossed a distance of 10,000 meters and arrived above Luoshui Lake. He did not slow down at all as he flew towards Luoshui Island in the center of Luoshui Lake. That's right. One of Chu Mu's destinations was the Luoshui True Palace. A distance of several hundred miles was nothing to Chu Mu, who had the speed of a peerless expert. He crossed it in just a few breaths. He did not hide his aura fluctuations at all. A powerful aura seemed to descend from the heavens. In an instant it crashed down and covered the entire Luo Water Island. Immediately, the expressions of the cultivators on Luo Water Island changed greatly. Luoshui Lake belonged to the Luoshui True Palace, so the cultivators on the island were naturally disciples of the Luoshui True Palace. At this moment, they felt a vast aura descending from the sky. The aura carried an astonishing sharpness, as if it was suspended in the sky. Although this aura was very strong, it didn't cause any harm to them. It was just a pressure. Those who didn't understand, but those who understood were incomparably shocked. This required an astonishing control of one's own aura to be able to do. Chu Mu didn't have any enmity with the Luo River True Palace, and he wasn't a demon who would kill without batting an eyelid. There was no need for him to harm others without benefiting himself. The palace master and elders of the Luo River True Palace flew into the sky and faced Chu Mu. "May I know which senior has graced us with his presence?" The palace master of the Luo River True Palace was a middle-aged woman. She was still very charming. It could be seen that she must have been very beautiful when she was young. In fact, the Luo River True Palace was a sect dominated by female cultivators. The cultivation method they cultivated would subtly change one's appearance and temperament, transforming them in a better way. Therefore, it was basically impossible to find ugly women in the Luo River True Palace. It was even difficult to find ordinary women. As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Mu appeared in front of them. He was very young. This was their first impression. If they hadn't directly sensed the powerful aura emanating from him, they would have doubted it. The Luo River True Palace has the essence of water, right? Chu Mu said as soon as he appeared in front of the palace master and elders. This straightforward manner of speaking stunned everyone in the Luo River True Palace. For a moment they didn't react. However, as they were in high positions, their reactions were naturally not slow. They immediately understood the meaning of Chu Mu's words, and their expressions changed. Senior, you must be joking. The essence of water is one of the essences of the power of heaven and earth. It is incomparably precious. How could our small Luo River True Palace have it? The palace master of the Luo River True Palace said in a very sincere tone. If Chu Mu hadn't received accurate information from the Wind Tower, he would probably have been swayed by her tone and expression. There's no need to speak nonsense. Chu Mu replied unhurriedly. The essence of water is useful to me, and I don't intend to take it by force. So, state your price. Hearing Chu Mu's direct and unquestionable words, the faces of the palace master and elders of the Luo River True Palace changed drastically. The essence of water was the most precious treasure of the Luo River True Palace. It had existed for thousands of years and was closely related to the Luo River True Palace. It could be said to be extremely important. Senior, please don't make things difficult for us, the palace master of the Luo River True Palace said. I'm talking about a deal with you. If it doesn't work, I'll take it away, Chu Mu said without holding back. If the deal didn't work, then he would take it by force. This was the decision he made when he came. In the past, he was limited by his strength. He couldn't collect the deep blue divine orbs and so on. He had many concerns. But now, he had begun to have considerable strength. Strength brought confidence. If he wanted to go one step at a time, he needed to fight for it if he wanted to go higher and see further. As the saying went, one step ahead would lead to another step ahead. Therefore, since he had already made up his mind, there was no need to delay. Senior, you are indeed powerful, but we of the Luo River True Palace are not persimmons that you can pinch as you please, an elder said with anger. It seems that you can't make a decision. If that's the case, let the person who can make the decision come. Chu Mu said. The index and middle fingers of his left hand formed a sword and pointed in the air. Suddenly, a sword light shot out, shattering the space. Wherever the light passed, the void was pierced. Nothing could stop it. The sword shot towards the highest peak of the Luo River Island. The sword light was so dazzling that the upper echelons of the Luo River True Palace had to close their eyes, unable to look at it directly. The aftershock of the light spread, causing them to tremble. It was as if they were being cut by countless sword auras. That mountain was the highest peak of the Luo River Island. Besides, it was also a forbidden area of the Luo River True Palace. Why was it a forbidden area? The answer came out very quickly. The sword light that Chu Mu pointed with his sword finger was extremely fast. It was like an aurora cutting across the sky, passing by in an instant. Its power was enough to pierce through a mountain in an instant. It could easily kill a bright young sword saint. With a pop, the sword light shot out, but it was blocked. Outside the mountain, a light blue screen of water appeared out of nowhere. Ripples spread out. The sword light was completely blocked. Aren't you being a little too overbearing? A gentle female voice sounded. Chu Mu could vaguely see the clear blue water and the blue sky. A cool breeze brushed past his face, and ripples overlapped. Soon after, a figure dressed in white appeared in front of Chu Mu, like a fairy who had walked out of a painting. It seemed slow, but it was fast. This person seemed to be even younger than the palace lord of the Luo River True Palace. Of course, this was only on the surface. Her actual age was much older than the palace lord of the Luo River True Palace. She was the peerless powerhouse hidden in the Luo River True Palace. She was also the only peerless powerhouse in the Luo River True Palace. She lived in seclusion on the highest peak of the Luo River Island, and her strength was at the first refinement level. As long as she did not exceed the first refinement level, Chu Mu was confident that he could deal with her. The current him was no longer at the first refinement level. He was even stronger. It's good that you're out. Chu Mu looked at the peerless powerhouse of the Luo River True Palace and said directly, as the strongest powerhouse of the Luo River True Palace, you should have enough authority to speak. The essence of water of the Luo River True Palace is mine. As he spoke, Chu Mu released all of his aura. In the sky, the clouds moved, and an invisible sword gradually condensed. The celestial sword floated in the air, and its terrifying sharpness was rampant. The void around it was directly suppressed, turning into a vacuum. Chu Mu's aura was only targeted at the peerless powerhouse of the Luo River True Palace. Hence, the others could not feel it clearly. However, when they saw the expression of the peerless powerhouse of the Luo River True Palace change drastically, as if she was facing a great enemy, they knew that this person's strength was definitely very terrifying. The peerless powerhouse of the Luo River True Palace also released her own aura. Her aura spread out and gradually resonated with the Luo River True Palace. An illusory image of the Luo River True Palace seemed to appear behind her, suppressing the void and facing the celestial sword above Chu Mu's head. The cultivation of the Luo River True Palace mainly focused on the power of water, and their weapons were also swords. However, they were not sword cultivators. However, they had extraordinary attainments in the power of water. The power of water was limitless, but the aura of Chu Mu's celestial sword in the air cut through everything. Whether it was hard or soft, whether it was existence or nothingness, everything was affected. Gradually, the peerless powerhouse of the Luo River True Palace felt the pressure, and sweat appeared on her forehead. Her strength was indeed strong, but she was only slightly stronger than a peerless powerhouse who had just entered the first refinement. In terms of level, she was at most about the same as Chu Mu. If they really fought, the outcome of the battle would be unpredictable, and the Luo River True Palace would suffer a calamity. The essence of water is mine. I won't do anything. The resources inside belong to you. Chu Mu took out a space ring and flew it to the peerless powerhouse of the Luo River True Palace. This could not be considered as robbing, but it was a forced trade. Suppressing the anger in her heart, the peerless powerhouse of the Luo River True Palace took the space ring and looked inside. She was immediately stunned. The resources in the space ring were not very valuable, but there were a lot of them. It was enough to further enrich the resources of the Luo River True Palace. They would not have to worry about the depletion of resources for the next few decades. In theory, it was enough to exchange the resources in the space ring for the essence of water. However, those resources were still relatively ordinary things and could barely be considered treasures. The essence of water, however, was a very precious treasure. The two were on different levels. Do you still need to think about it? Chu Mu asked, his aura increasing. Chapter 1878. For the peerless expert of the Luo River True Palace, it was a difficult choice. It was like torture. However, she didn't hesitate for long before making a decision. Agree to the deal. If she didn't agree, a great battle would be inevitable. It wasn't clear who would win in the end, but during the battle, the Luo River True Palace would suffer great damage and suffer great losses. Even if she could defeat her opponent, she wouldn't be able to make him stay. She would only provoke a strong enemy and be remembered. For the Luo River True Palace, it would only be a disaster. Although such a deal was forced, for the sake of the Luo River True Palace's safety, she could only accept it. It was better than nothing. However, the peerless expert of the Luo River True Palace also made her own request. Exploring the secret realm, is it? I can agree, but I want half of the profits, Chu Mu said. 30%, she bargained. Half. Do you agree or not? Chu Mu's attitude was very firm. His whole body radiated sharpness, like a divine sword unsheathed. The peerless expert of the Luo River True Palace suddenly felt a headache. It wasn't easy to deal with someone like Chu Mu, but in the end she still agreed. Okay, half. However, the innate water spirit can strengthen the power of my water arts, so I can't give it to you now. I can only give it to you after the secret realm is explored, said the peerless expert of the Luo River True Palace. Okay, but you have to tell me everything you know about the secret realm. Chumu also made his own request. He wasn't here to make friends, so he naturally wouldn't be polite. This secret realm is located at the bottom of the Luo River True Palace. The peerless expert of the Luo River True Palace explained directly. She quickly descended with Chumu. In ancient times, the Luo River True Palace hadn't appeared yet. At that time, the Luo River True Palace was a super force, the Holy Water Palace. Chumu nodded and continued to listen. At that time, the Holy Water Palace was the top force in the Tianshui region. It was rumored that the founder was the Holy Water Saint Emperor. Chumu was shocked. Ever since he knew the classification of the 5 refinements, Chumu was even more respectful of the Saint Emperor. As the saying goes, the ignorant are fearless. However, the more you know, the more you understand, and the more you revere. The sage emperor was also known as the Great Emperor. The sect established by the sacred emperor was definitely extraordinary. Chumu was looking forward to the trip to the secret domain. With the explanation of the Luo River True Palace's peerless expert, Chumu also understood that the reason she had proposed to explore with him was because she had already entered once and encountered difficulties. With his strength alone, it would be too difficult. Chumu's aura permeated his entire body. It was shockingly powerful, completely concealing the fluctuations of his cultivation. The other party could not tell that his actual cultivation was at the saint level. In the blink of an eye, the two of them entered Lake Luoshui one after the other. Powerful auras permeated the surroundings, forming a unique force field with extremely high density. It directly pushed away the water of Lake Luoshui, unable to affect the two of them at all. After diving down quickly, Chumu realized that the Lake Luoshui was very deep. The deeper they went, the greater the water pressure. It became heavier and heavier, suppressing Chumu and Luoshui's auras. They had no choice but to strengthen their auras to make them more stable. The Luo River True Palace's expert's aura was light blue, like an oval cover. Her aura flowed like layers of water, dispersing the pressure from all directions. Chumu's aura was silver-white. It was sword chi. As it flowed, it was filled with astonishing sharpness, cutting through all the pressure. Not long after, the two of them arrived at the deepest part of Lake Luoshui. The peerless expert of the Luo River True Palace took out a round plate and immediately formed many hand seals. Under the flickering blue light, the light in front of them seemed to distort, and then a vortex entrance appeared. The deep blue vortex was very clear and very beautiful. The ruins of the Holy Water Palace are inside, Luo Zhening said. This was the name of the peerless expert of the Luo River True Palace. Let's go. Chumu gestured for her to enter first and then followed. As soon as they entered the vortex entrance, Chumu immediately felt a strong fluctuation of water vapor. That was because the power of water was thicker. However, this place was not underwater, but an environment similar to that of land. The palace complex was many times larger than the Luo River True Palace, but most of them had already collapsed, turning into ruins. Out of all the palaces, only one was intact. It seemed that there was no damage at all. I've entered once and searched. I'm sure that the treasures should be in that palace, Luo Zhening said. However, if we want to enter the palace, we have to defeat the guards. There are 2 guards, and each of them has the strength of a peerless first refinement cultivator. I'm not afraid of fighting one-on-one, but I can't deal with 2 of them. As they spoke, the 2 had already arrived outside the palace. Indeed, there were 2 guards standing at the entrance of the palace. They looked like statues. As Chumu and Luo Zhening neared a certain distance, the 2 statues trembled, and something seemed to fall from their bodies. They turned their heads, and their eyes lit up, locking onto Chumu and Luo Zhening. A chill suddenly emerged from the 2 of them. Without hesitation, Chumu immediately retreated. At the same time, An icicle appeared from beneath his feet and shot up into the sky like a sharp sword. The bone-chilling coldness invaded Chu Mu's body, and he couldn't help but tremble. Chu Mu didn't know much about the Holy Water Palace, and the information he got from Luo Zhenning wasn't much either. However, Chu Mu could tell that the two guards weren't real people, but puppets, a very special type of puppet. As for how special they were, Chu Mu wasn't sure. Chu Mu had just dodged and steadied himself when a flash of white light appeared in front of him. It instantly froze the void and spread towards him. The coldness seemed to want to freeze the heavens and earth. The other party attacked with his sword. The sword was like black ice. Chu Mu was never afraid of sword fights. With the silver light spiritual sword and the eternal spiritual sword in hand, Chu Mu crossed his swords and guided them. A circular force field rippled outwards. With a turn of his body, he appeared at the side of the guard. His sword was like a shooting star. On the other side, Luo Zhenning and the guard were also fighting. Just by exchanging blows, Chu Mu was sure that the guard's strength had indeed reached the level of a first refinement expert. It wasn't at the initial stage, nor was it at the peak. It could be considered as an ordinary first refinement expert. Even so, it was still very strong. Chu Mu's two swords slashed straight at the guard's body. Like the sound of leather being defeated, the two sharp swords only left 2 marks and didn't break through the puppet's defense. Even though Chu Mu didn't use any sword moves, the power of the 2 swords was still very strong. Yet, it couldn't break the guard's defense. This meant that the guard's body was very tough and its defense was shocking. His body was very agile. The combination of the ghostly dragon disorienting steps and the ghostly dragon's shadowless body allowed Chu Mu to advance and retreat freely. He easily dodged the guard's every attack and found an opportunity to attack and counterattack. After a few attempts, Chu Mu was sure that the guard was a puppet. It was just that it had a certain amount of intelligence. It was similar to a heavenly puppet, but there were some differences. A heavenly puppet could cultivate on its own. However, after this kind of guard was created, its strength would be the same. To be able to have a puppet at the level of a first refinement expert, one could see the glory and power of the Holy Water Palace. Chu Mu and the guard were evenly matched. However, as he fought, he was secretly observing the battle between Luo Zhenning and the guard. He didn't miss out on any details. Luo Zhenning was very proficient in the water spell. She had mastered the essence of the water spell. There was a strange spiritual fluctuation of water vapor on her body. Chu Mu guessed that it was the fluctuation of the innate water spirit. Under the influence of the innate water spirit, the power of Luo Zhenning's water spell increased. Gradually, she started to suppress the guard. However, it wasn't easy to defeat the guard. After observing for a while, and making sure that he didn't miss out on anything, Chu Mu quickly retreated and used the light of puppet destruction. The light of puppet destruction hit the guard's body and immediately weakened its strength by 30%. However, Chu Mu could feel that there was a force in the guard's body that was attacking the light of puppet destruction. It seemed that it wouldn't take long for the guard to break free from the influence of the light of puppet destruction. Cloud Piercer! Cutting Dao! Both swords struck out. The powerful sword style directly hit the guard that was weakened by the light of puppet destruction. After the same strength was weakened by 30%, the guard's strength fell below the level of a first refinement expert. Such strength couldn't block Chu Mu's dual swords at all. It was pierced and cut. The guard's head was pierced and its body was cut in half. After the dual swords collided, the guard was killed. Chu Mu raised his sword and picked up the core of the guard's puppet. After taking a look, he kept it in his spatial ring and prepared to bring it back to the real sword sect. "Do you need any help?" Chu Mu looked at Luo Zhenning and asked. "Okay." Luo Zhenning didn't have any intention to decline and answered directly. Chu Mu didn't use the light of puppet destruction. Instead, he used his sword style. With Luo Zhenning holding back the guard, Chu Mu didn't need to use the heart and sword as one. With a wave of his sword, the sky above the holy water's secret realm changed. The wind blew and the clouds moved. Lightning flashed as if the heavens were angry. Heaven's might sword style. This was a sword style with 3 true meanings. It was undoubtedly the most powerful sword style that Chu Mu had created. The guard couldn't dodge. The terrifying heaven's might sword style slashed down. It was as if the heavens were angry and punished. Luo Zhening's expression changed drastically. The sword wasn't targeted at her, but the power of the sword shocked her. With a boom, the guard was struck by the sword and was sent flying. Countless cracks appeared on its tough body, which quickly spread out and covered its entire body. It looked like a ceramic that was about to shatter. Cloud Piercer. He took a step forward and the other sword followed. It pierced through the void and hit the guard's head. The guard's body was instantly shattered and died. He raised his sword and took the guard's core and put it away. "Okay, it's time to go in," Chu Mu said. "Yes, but I don't know if there are other dangers in the hall," Luo Zhening said. Her body was surrounded by water-like light patterns as she rushed into the hall. Then, she stopped. Chu Mu also stopped after entering. Chapter 1879. There were no other guards in the hall, and there seemed to be no other danger. In front of him, there were piles of crystals of different colors that were like small mountains. They gave off a shocking aura. It was the aura of the power of heaven and earth. It was the power of laws. Crystallization of the laws. Luo Zhening covered her mouth and gasped in shock. She had seen nomological law crystals before. She had some in her spatial ring, but there were not many of them. Compared to the pile of nomological law crystals in front of her, the difference was huge. Chu Mu's heart skipped a beat. These things in front of him were crystallization of fire and crystallization of water. They were treasures of the same level as the pure yang crystallization that he had obtained in the mysterious Yang Palace. Pure yang crystallization was formed by the accumulation of pure yang energy over a long period of time. These crystallization of fire and crystallization of water were formed based on the same principle. These crystals were called crystallization of the laws by the peerless expert. This was because the energy contained within them could play an obvious supporting role in the refinement of the laws. Otherwise, it would take a long time to refine the laws by relying on one's own elemental energy alone. Of course, to use the crystallization of the laws to assist in the refinement of one's own elemental energy, one would need a corresponding crystallization of the laws. For example, the crystallization of the laws of flame required the assistance of the crystallization of the laws of flame. The crystallization of the pure yang energy was also possible, but its effect was not as direct as that of the crystallization of fire. The crystallization of the laws of flame was not only a treasure used by the peerless experts to refine the laws of flame, but also a currency used by the peerless experts. Now, in front of Chu Mu and Luo Zhening, there were 3 piles of crystallization of the laws of flame, crystallization of water, and crystallization of gold. The crystallization of flame and crystallization of gold looked similar, but the crystallization of water was the most abundant. "Let's count them and divide them equally," Chu Mu said. "Okay." Although Luo Zhening regretted agreeing to divide the crystallization of the laws of flame equally with Chu Mu, she had already agreed. Furthermore, Chu Mu had displayed his strength when he killed the 2 guards, which made her wary. She did not have the confidence to go against him, so she did not dare to go back on her word. Just as the 2 of them were about to tally the crystallization of the laws of flame, a wave of energy suddenly descended, causing Chu Mu and Luo Zhening to be on high alert. A figure appeared out of thin air in front of them. It was a woman in a blue robe. "I am the 32nd generation elder of the Holy Water Palace. The fact that you are able to enter this place means that you are fated with my Holy Water Palace." This was merely a shadow left behind by her. As it fluttered, it was like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any moment. "This is one of the places where the last resources and treasures of my divine water palace are stored. It belongs to you now. The true water profound technique that you cultivate is somewhat related to my holy water palace. Are you willing to accept my inheritance? The woman looked at Luo Zhening. She was able to determine Luo Zhening's cultivation technique based on her aura and proposed to inherit it. The Holy Water Palace was a sect founded by the Holy Water Saint Emperor. The elders at that time were peerless experts. Furthermore, they were not at the first refinement but at least at the third refinement. Furthermore, the sect founded by the Holy Water Saint Emperor was extremely profound. The cultivation technique that they cultivated was even more shocking. It was many times more profound than the true water profound technique that Luo Zhening cultivated. In fact, the true water profound technique was indeed somewhat related to the Holy Water Palace. This was because the true water profound technique was a cultivation technique that the disciples of the Holy Water Palace had cultivated. Among all the cultivation techniques of the Holy Water Palace, it could only be considered as a first-rate cultivation technique. Obtaining the inheritance of an elder of the Holy Water Palace was a great opportunity. Luo Zhening naturally would not let go of such an opportunity. Your origin energy cultivation has only reached the peak of level 9 Aeon not long ago. You have not started to refine your origin energy, right? The elder of the Holy Water Palace looked at Chu Mu. Even though it was just a shadow, her gaze made Chu Mu feel as if she could see through him. This sentence shocked both Chu Mu and Luo Zhening. His cultivation had just reached the peak of level 9 Aeon, and he had not started to refine his origin energy? Luo Zhening was very clear about what this meant. It meant that the other party had not started refining the power of the Dharma. If that was the case, the other party's cultivation level was still that of a martial sage. However, the strength that he displayed was at the level of a first refinement expert. Could it be that he was a monster? A level 9 sage body. So it turns out that you have cultivated both the way of origin energy and the way of the sage body. You must be a prodigy. Holy Water Palace's elder's tone was also filled with shock. A monster like Chu Mu had never appeared even during Holy Water Palace's most powerful period. Since you've come, it's fate. However, your cultivation method is completely different from Holy Water Palace's, and my inheritance can only be given to one person. Thus, I'll gift this Holy Water True Fluid to you. Holy Water True Liquid? Chu Mu did not understand. It sounded like a treasure, but he did not know what it was used for. Divine Water True Fluid is our Divine Water Palace's treasure. It can refine Yuan energy and make it even purer. It can also cleanse the sacred body and make it even purer. It's even more beneficial to the refinement of the sacred body. The Divine Water Palace elder's short explanation caused Chu Mu's eyes to light up. The purpose of his trip was to obtain the essence of water and essence of earth. He also wanted to find treasures that could help him refine his origin energy and save a lot of time. He also wanted to find treasures that could refine his sage body to the maximum level and increase his own strength. Now, he was about to obtain the essence of water and Holy Water True Liquid. It could help him refine his origin energy and refine his sage body. It would be killing two birds with one stone. Chu Mu could not help but feel lucky that he had come to the Luo Water Palace. He was also glad that he had not started a massacre. Otherwise, he would have missed this opportunity. Yes, in Chu Mu's opinion, this was an opportunity that belonged to him. Of course, it was also an opportunity that belonged to Luo Zhening. If it were not for Chu Mu, Luo Zhening did not know how long it would take for her to enter the main hall of the Holy Water Palace. At this time, a jade bottle flew out to Chu Mu. It was completely white, pure, and very warm. Chu Mu grabbed the jade bottle. The aura on it was deep and obscure. He probed with his soul power into the white jade bottle and immediately saw the liquid inside. It was an almost transparent liquid with a sliver of silver light. The aura emitted by the liquid was as cool as the night water and also refreshed the mind. It looked like a small white jade bottle half the size of a palm, but it was very big inside. "Thank you, Elder." Chumu cupped his hands and said, "It will take some time to accept my inheritance. If you have anything else to do, you can deal with it first." The Elder of the Holy Water Palace said, "Yes, Elder." Luo Zhening replied respectfully. Then, she looked at Chu Mu and said, "We will split the law crystallization. I will give you the innate water spirit now." As her voice fell, the water vapor on her body became stronger. In the palm of her right hand, a ball of light blue condensed rapidly. It finally took shape and turned into a spiritual object that looked like a water snake. Innate water spirit. This thing was similar to the metal spirit. Once it was integrated into the body, it could be used to enhance one's abilities. To Luo Zhening, the innate water spirit could enhance the power of her water technique to a certain extent. Giving it to Chu Mu was equivalent to weakening her own abilities. However, this was a deal and she could not go back on it. Fortunately, she was able to obtain the inheritance of the Elder of the Holy Water Palace. By then, her own abilities might improve. After Chu Mu received the innate water spirit, he kept it in his body. When he got close to the metal spirit, the two entangled and chased each other playfully. In the 5 elements, metal gave birth to water. The metal spirit had a nourishing effect on the innate water spirit. After obtaining the innate water spirit, the deal between the two was completed. Next, it was time to split the law crystallization. After counting, the amount of fire crystallization and metal crystallization were the same. The amount of water crystallization was equivalent to 80% of the fire realm and metal crystallization. Split equally. The metal crystallization belongs to me. The fire crystallization belongs to you. The water crystallization will be split equally. Luo Zhening said, "I also need the metal crystallization." Chu Mu smiled. "Then let's split equally," Luo Zhening said helplessly. In the end, the fire realm, water crystallization, and metal crystallization would be split equally. "Elder, I will take my leave." After bowing to the Elder of the Holy Water Palace, Chu Mu nodded to Luo Zhening and left quickly with the law crystallization. After seeing Chu Mu's figure disappear, Luo Zhening retracted her gaze and looked at the Elder of the Holy Water Palace. "Get ready to accept my legacy," the Elder of the Holy Water Palace said. Immediately, the shadow turned into a light blue ray and rushed into Luo Zhening's mind. The Elder of the Holy Water Palace moved so quickly that Luo Zhening could not react in time. She was stunned and her expression changed. Blue light flickered in her eyes. "Elder, what are you doing?" Luo Zhening screamed, as though something bad was about to happen. Luo Zhening's expression changed constantly. Her body trembled and her aura became chaotic. After a full hour, he finally calmed down and his complexion returned to normal. However, he seemed to be a little different from before. "I never thought that I, Shin Shueishio, would return to the world one day." A voice that was different from Luo Zhening's sounded. That tone was more surprised and indifferent. "Let's finish what we did not finish in the past in this life." With a thought, the palace of the Holy Water Palace trembled, and light shot out in all directions. A round pearl broke out of the ground and landed in Luo Zhening's, no, Shin Shueishio's, jade-like palm. It was a deep blue color, perfect and flawless. There were specks of starlight on it, and it was very mesmerizing. It was the dark blue pearl. Then, Shin Shueishio left the secret area of the Holy Water Palace and returned to the Luo Water Palace. She entered the forbidden area to cultivate. Chapter 1880. Chu Mu did not know that after he left the Holy Water Secret Realm, the only peerless expert of the Luo Shui True Palace had been possessed. Even Chu Mu would not have taken any precautions in such a situation, let alone Luo Zhening herself. After all, the words and actions of the Elder of the Holy Water Palace gave off a sense of sincerity. Divine water true fluid was no ordinary treasure. It was a supreme treasure. Yet, he had given it to Chu Mu just like that. Normal people wouldn't be so smart. However, thinking about it, in order to successfully possess Chu Mu and hide the deep blue divine pearl, it was understandable. However, even if Chu Mu knew that Luo Zhenning had been successfully possessed, he would not have cared. Firstly, he was not strong enough to do so. Secondly, it had nothing to do with him. With the innate holy water true liquid and a large pile of precept crystals, Chu Mu had gained a lot this time. After leaving the holy water secret realm, he rushed out of the water. However, he did not leave the Luo Shui lake immediately. Instead, he found a small uninhabited island and landed on it. After looking around, he found that the primordial qi on such a small island was relatively ordinary and there were no spiritual herbs growing there. Therefore, there were few people around. I'll use the holy water true liquid to refine my primordial qi. If there's any left, I'll use it to cleanse my divine body, Chu Mu thought to himself. After fighting with Luo Zhenning, he realized the importance of strength. After all, Luo Zhenning was just an ordinary peerless expert of the first refinement. If he could not defeat or kill her, there was no way he could defeat second refinement experts like Zhengli and Yuho, as well as the more powerful Imperial Court and Heavenly Clan. Even his next target, the owner of the essence of Earth, was so powerful that he was not someone he could go up against at the moment. After getting rid of distracting thoughts and calming down, Chu Mu stretched out both hands. His fingers were like countless illusions, covering the surroundings. Layers upon layers of seals intertwined and covered the surroundings. Very quickly, a portion of the island was covered, concealing Chu Mu's aura fluctuations. The distorted light seemed to form an illusion. From the outside, one couldn't see Chu Mu at all, nor could they see any part of the island covered. Everything was normal. Only those with profound attainments in the path of sealing or those whose strength far surpassed Chu Mu would be able to see through the mystery. After laying down the seals, Chu Mu took out the white jade bottle. Out of caution, he checked it and found no traces of tampering. The amount of divine water true fluid in this white jade bottle was a total of 500 kilograms. Chu Mu did not have much of an idea about this. After all, he did not know the effects of divine water true fluid. If the effects were average, 500 kilograms would be nothing. However, if the effects were great, 500 kilograms would be shocking. Chu Mu could feel the aura fluctuations contained within. However, the holy water true liquid was not used to increase one's cultivation. Hence, the power it contained was not very majestic. It was hard to judge. Chu Mu tried to consume about 500 kilograms. The cool liquid flowed down his throat and into his body. It quickly transformed into a cool aura that spread throughout his body. He did not need to take the initiative. The cool aura from the holy water true liquid flowed through his meridians. Chu Mu quickly mobilized the divine wilderness sword energy. As it flowed through his meridians, it came into contact with the aura of the holy water true liquid. Instantly, the holy water true liquid wrapped around the divine wilderness sword energy. Chu Mu could feel the impurities in the divine wilderness sword energy being removed bit by bit. The process of tempering was to remove the impurities. After removing the impurities, it was continuously condensed and compressed. Hence, the first step of tempering one's origin energy was to remove the impurities. The second step was to compress and condense it. Very quickly, the 500 kilograms of holy water true liquid was used up. Chu Mu could feel his divine wilderness sword energy being slightly tempered. However, it was not very obvious. Immediately after, Chu Mu consumed 5 kilograms of holy water true liquid. The effects were even more intense. The holy water true fluid was a treasure that the Holy Water Palace had used a secret technique to extract from various water-type treasures and then fuse them together to create. Usually, only those disciples with outstanding talent and higher status were qualified to enjoy it. However, it was impossible to obtain 500 kilograms of it all at once. At most, it would be good to obtain a few dozen kilograms. After consuming 5 kilograms of holy water true liquid, The feeling of tempering became even more obvious. However, Chu Mu's dantian had undergone a transformation. The amount of sword energy was 10 times that of a normal 9-star saint. Furthermore, because the Divine Wilderness Sword art was a very high-level cultivation technique, the Divine Wilderness Sword energy that was cultivated was many times purer and more condensed than normal sword energy. Naturally, it was not easy to temper it. After consuming 10 kilograms of holy water true liquid, Chu Mu used the power of his divine soul to push it forward. The speed was faster and the efficiency was higher. Very quickly, Chu Mu consumed more than 100 kilograms of holy water true liquid. He could clearly feel that the Divine Wilderness Sword energy had undergone a preliminary tempering. The impurities were all removed and the circulation was at least 30% smoother. The circulation of the sword energy was smoother, which meant that it would be faster to mobilize the sword energy in battle. It also meant that it would be better to seize the initiative. Chu Mu's Divine Wilderness Sword energy was of a very high level, so there were naturally fewer impurities. After the first step of removing the impurities was completed, the second step of compression and condensation was to be carried out. After compressing and condensing the sword energy, there would be space in the dantian for him to cultivate new sword energy. After increasing the amount of sword energy, he would continue to remove the impurities and compress and condense the sword energy. This process would be repeated continuously until the sword energy that had been tempered to the extreme filled the entire dantian. At that time, he would be able to begin tempering the laws. Of course, Chu Mu did not have any laws. Therefore, he would not undergo the tempering of laws. As expected of a treasure. If I were to cultivate it myself, I'm afraid it would take me several years to completely remove the impurity. Chu Mu thought to himself. 100 kilograms of Divine Wilderness Sword energy to remove the impurities was equivalent to saving him several years of time. It was indeed very good. I just don't know if this 1,000 kilograms will be enough for me to temper it to the extreme. With that thought, Chu Mu continued tempering. This time, it took a total of 300 kilograms of Divine Water True Liquid for Chu Mu to feel that his Divine Wilderness Sword energy had been tempered to the extreme. The amount had been reduced by a lot. It was only a third of the original amount. It had become more condensed, as if it had changed from a hemp rope to a metal wire. It was even more powerful. This meant that Chu Mu's Divine Wilderness Sword energy could continue to increase by 3 times. After some calculations, Chu Mu realized that 1,000 kilograms of Divine Water True Liquid did not seem to be enough. This was because after tempering, he would consume 400 kilograms. The remaining 600 kilograms could at most be tempered once more. He was afraid that he would not be able to complete the tempering on the last try. Furthermore, after Chu Mu's Divine Wilderness Sword energy had been compressed and condensed, it had reached the extreme. In other words, if he wanted to temper it again, he had to first cultivate a new Divine Wilderness Sword energy. Without a doubt, it would take a considerable amount of time. Even though it would be faster than before, it would not be that easy. It would require a large amount of energy to absorb. If that's the case, let's try the tempering of the sacred body first, Chu Mu thought to himself. He quickly consumed another 50 kilograms of Divine Water True Liquid. This time, he did not use it to temper the Divine Wilderness Sword energy. Instead, under Chu Mu's conscious guidance, the power of the Divine Water True Liquid passed through his meridians and permeated his body. Immediately, he felt waves of coolness coming from his body. Gradually, he felt itchy, as if there were countless ants crawling around in his body. This feeling was very strange. It was as if some kind of change was happening in his muscles. After a period of time, the power of the 50 kilograms of Divine Water True Liquid was completely consumed. Chu Mu also felt that his body seemed to have become lighter. It was as if he was originally carrying a large rock on his back, but now he had put it down. His body was as light as a swallow. It was as if he could soar into the sky with just a thought. However, he knew very well that this was just a feeling. It was not that his body had become lighter. In fact, there was no change in weight. It was just that the divine water true liquid had tempered his body. It had changed the structure of his body slightly, making it more reasonable and more perfect. Such a body would absorb external power during tempering. The conversion efficiency would be higher, and the tempering effect would naturally be better. Continue the tempering, he said to himself. After consuming another 50 kilograms of divine water true liquid, his sacred body was once again tempered. After the tempering, Chu Mu felt that his sacred body seemed to have become lighter. Of course, it was not as obvious as the first tempering. If the disciples of the Holy Water Palace knew that Chu Mu had used 200 kilograms of divine water true liquid to temper his sacred body, they would definitely be extremely jealous and curse him. They were very clear about the preciousness of the divine water true liquid. Ordinary disciples were not qualified to obtain it. Those who could obtain it were core disciples who had to make a certain amount of contributions. The 500 kilograms of divine water true liquid that Chu Mu had obtained might be an amount that some core disciples could not obtain even if they worked their entire lives. Every 50 kilograms was extremely precious. They would only use it to temper their origin power. After all, the Holy Water Palace did not have any cultivators of the path of the sacred body. Of course, the current Holy Water Palace had long become history. After consuming 200 kilograms of divine water true liquid, Chu Mu's sacred body had become much lighter. The structure of his body had also become more reasonable. There are still 200 kilograms of divine water true liquid left. Chu Mu began to think. Perhaps this was the last 200 kilograms of divine water true liquid. It would undoubtedly be even more precious. Therefore, it was better to keep it for now. Chu Mu hesitated for a moment. Currently, the tempering of the divine wilderness sword essence had reached the peak. However, the quantity was 2/3 less. He had to replenish it and temper it again. Only after reaching the peak could he be considered to have reached the peak of the path of origin power. However, that would require time and some conditions. After thinking about it, Chu Mu finally decided to continue tempering his sacred body. After tempering his sacred body with treasures in the future, the tempering effect would be better. For example, if Chu Mu had used the divine water true liquid to temper his sacred body before consuming the berserk sacred blood and entering the blood essence pool to cultivate, perhaps his sacred body would have reached the late stage of level 9 or even the peak. Since he had made up his mind, Chu Mu no longer hesitated. He absorbed the remaining 400 kilograms of divine water true liquid and continued tempering his sacred body with the guidance of his spiritual power.